What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Game Night YouTube channel. In today's video, guys, we're going over my personal top 10 favorite solo player tabletop games that I've played this year in 2024. So the way I'm going to break it down, guys, is I'm going to do some pros and some cons of all 10 of these games. We're going to go over game mechanics, theme, replayability, components and quality, and also fun factor. So those are sort of like the 5 talking points that I'm going to cover for each of the 10 games. And yeah, again, this is my personal top 10 list. So, you know, some of these games might not be your personal favorites. These are my favorites, and I've got them ranked from 10 all the way up to my number 1 favorite game. So of course, you know, you may have different opinions. You might move some of these around on your list, but these are my personal favorites, and I'm sure some of these will definitely resonate with you guys. So let's get right into it, guys. So coming in at number 10 on the list is Gamma Guild. Now, this is a relatively new game. And I should also mention, too, that not all of the games on this list necessarily came out in the year 2024. It's just games that I've personally played in 2024. But in this case, with Gamma Guild, this one did come out this year in 2024, and it is created by Goblin Hour Games. And this is a fantastic solo player mint tin game. And we're going to get into the pros for this game first. So let's cover the game mechanics. So, Gamma Guild it's sort of like a solitaire-esque style game. It definitely reminds me of like classic solitaire. Of course, it's different. It's not exactly the same, but it has that vibe. You have like columns of cards, and you're trying to meet certain requirements for the quests. Almost feels similar to when you're playing solitaire and you need a certain color or number to lay on a particular column, and you're trying to clear cards out of the column. And it has that vibe to it. It definitely has that vibe to it. So it feels like solitaire, but like on a whole other level. It's like, you know, solitaire, like really fleshed out with really cool rules and different abilities and all kinds of stuff on the cards that you can get with the different perk cards that give you different abilities and stuff. So yeah, definitely has that really cool solitaire vibe to it. So it feels sort of familiar, which is kind of neat. Also, it's extremely easy to learn. So not only does it feel sort of familiar, it's also very easy to learn. And that makes Gamma Guild a really great like first game if you're new to this whole solo player tabletop world. I would say Gamma Guild would be highly recommended to kind of start your journey out, because not only is it familiar because it feels sort of like solitaire, it's also really easy to learn. There's not a lot of rules, and once you pick it up, you pretty much get it. It's one of those like easy to learn, hard to master type games. Also, it's extremely balanced for the luck versus the strategy. Of course, it's a card game, and all of the games that are going to be on this list, I might bring up this talking point. All of them have cards, all of them have dice. There's luck involved, you know. That's just part of it. If you don't like luck in games, there's chess and there's Go and there's checkers. You know what I mean? So, yeah, the luck and the skill, the luck and the strategy in this game, it's still balanced really well. So, of course, you're drawing cards. Sometimes you might get unlucky. You might get some really gnarly, unlucky combinations of quests out on the board that are tough to deal with, but that's what makes the game exciting. That random element really makes it exciting, and when those moments happen, you're like, oh man, this is going to be difficult, and it makes it feel really rewarding when you're able to actually complete those quests and push past those quote-unquote unlucky moments. I think that's really cool. And of course, you know, you've got your perk cards, so you can choose when to use those. Those are really going to help mitigate some of the luck. And, you know, the player has autonomy. You can choose what quests you want to send your guild members on and all of that kind of stuff. So there's definitely skill and strategy involved in the game too. And then lastly, for the game mechanics, the game plays very quickly. It's a relatively short experience. I think it probably on average takes maybe, I don't know, 10 to 15 minutes or something to get through one single, you know, playthrough of the game. So it plays very quickly. So all of those points right there are really solid for as far as the game mechanics go in Gamma Guild. And then we're going to move on to the theme. So I think it has a really cool, unique theme. Essentially, your guild is like on the brink of being dissolved, essentially, and you need to prove your worth by completing these 12 quests before the end of the 12 days is up. And that's just really cool. Of course, it's sort of set in a sort of fantasy-esque type of theme, which is really neat. But then, you even have some pretty whimsical things in there, like Nash is one of the characters, and he's essentially just a shark, which is really cool. So, but it's loosely based in that sort of fantasy, typical fantasy world vibes, which is really cool, sort of medieval type vibes. So it's got a really cool, unique theme as far as that goes. I think that's really neat. The whole guild idea that you're trying to keep your guild together. Pretty cool, because you could really take this game, and most games, right? You could take them and you can reskin them with a totally different theme, have the same game mechanics, but the theme really brings the game to life and adds such a cool vibe to it, and it works really well in Gamma Guild. Also, the art is really, really good in this game. It's very stylized. I haven't seen anything quite like it. I don't want to call it cell shading, but it almost reminds me of like the Zelda game Wind Waker a little bit, loosely. The art has that sort of a similar style to that sort of, and I think it came out really, really well. The art is really detailed on the cards. It's all very vibrant and colorful, and it looks really good, and it totally fits the vibe of the game. Now we're going to move into replayability. So I would say this game has really good replay value because essentially every time you play the game, you're going to be getting different quests. You're not always going to get the same quests each time. The fact that the quest deck has 24 cards means that you're going to be completing half of those. So you'll be completing 12 of those quests during a playthrough, and the other 12 cards act as like your day countdown timers with the sundial on it. So each time you play, you shuffle up that 24 card deck, and you're going to get 12 random quests to go on. So of course you're going to see, all the quests at some point, but the way that the quests interact with one another really adds to the replayability of the game. So you're going to be getting different combinations of quests that affect other quests in particular ways. So it's always going to feel different for the most part when you play the game. And on top of that, you've got all of the perks as well, because each card each of the guild member cards rather has a perk on the bottom half of the card. And there's a bunch of different perks. So you're going to be getting different perks from game to game. You're not always going to get the same ones. You're not always going to get nearly as many perks one game as you might the next game. So that's definitely going to add to the dynamic replayability of the game, having those different perks in the game as well. So yeah, Gamma Guild is highly, highly replayable. In my personal opinion, way more so than just your standard solitaire game. And a lot of people love solitaire and they play the heck out of solitaire. So yeah, if you like solitaire, you're probably going to like Gamma Guild. Chances are you would love Gamma Guild. And in my opinion, it has even more replayability. So now we're going to go over the components and the quality. This is going to be a theme that I'm going to probably repeat as we go through these games. It's high quality, guys. All of these games are high quality. This particular game is produced by the Game Crafter, and I'm sure most of you guys know, they make excellent quality games. So this is no exception. It's just a strictly card game. There's no components, which is really neat. And the cards they're great. I mean, they're sturdy. They're printed on, high quality card stock. Everything about it is just top notch, professional. And it looks great. And also, like I mentioned earlier, the artwork looks fantastic on it. And and there's no components. It's literally just cards. There are no dice. There's no meeples. There's no counters or tokens or anything. It's just the cards. So yeah, you can fit all of it perfectly inside of the tin, and it's very compact, obviously, because it comes in a little mint tin. So you can just slip the mint tin in your pocket and you are good to go. Okay, now we're going to go over the fun factor. So it's got a good mix of luck and strategy, like I mentioned earlier, and I think that makes games really fun. If it's got too much luck, for me personally, again, remember, all of this that I'm saying in this video is my own personal opinion. If a game has too much luck in it, it's not as fun for me. Like, I could never see myself sitting in a casino, like playing a slot machine. That would like bore me to tears. I would never, ever want to do that. And on the flip side, games that are just like completely skill-based with no luck at all, like chess and stuff like that. I tried to get into chess several times in my life, and I'll get really into it for like a couple weeks. And then I'm just like, I don't know. It's just, it's too much. It gets to be too much for me. And it's not about winning or losing. It's just, the time that you have to invest to get really good at games that, you know, are 100% skill based like chess. While I respect it, and I think that is so cool, and I think it's amazing that games like that exist. And I think it's amazing that people get that interested in those games and can get so good at them, and the skill ceiling is so high. I like a little bit of randomness and luck thrown into my game too, to keep things spicy. You know what I mean? To keep it a little bit more casual and a little bit more spicy. And so I think that makes the fun factor for Gamma Guild perfect for me, because it's got a great balance of the luck and strategy. And also, from my experience so far playing Gamma Guild, the games are always really, really close. It's like when I win, I typically just barely won. Like, it was so close. And when I lose, I was almost gonna win. I was so close to winning. And then it's like, oh man, I want to play again. So yeah, the games are always really close, which shows you that the game is really well balanced. And again, that adds to the fun factor for sure for Gamma Guild. And now we're going to move into the cons. So, you know, fair warning, guys. Again, all of these, I can't overstate this enough. All of this stuff is my own personal opinion. And obviously, all 10 of the games on this list made it to this list because they are my absolute favorite games that I have played this year. And I love all of these games. But I thought I would do similar to how I did in my top 5 Mint Tin game video that I put out several months ago. I figured I would do like a pros and cons list to be very objective about the games. And then maybe that'll give you guys more information to, you know, judge, hey, is this particular game for me? Should I check this game out or not? And, you know, you can maybe garner what you will from my own personal opinions from my pros and cons. So for the cons for Gamma Guild, I essentially have like a game mechanic con, and it's that it can get a bit repetitive. It's similar to Solitaire. And to be fair, this is not just a problem with Gamma Guild. This is a problem with basically anything in life. If you do something enough times, it's going to get repetitive, right? So this is a very sort of nitpick con, because I wanted to put some kind of objective, you know, list together with pros and cons. And that's the only thing I could really come up with for Gamma Guild, is I could see it maybe getting a little bit repetitive. Although it does have that high replay value that you've got all of these different quests that you can go on. Of course, once you've played the game enough times, you're going to have seen all of them, and maybe it'll feel a little bit samey. But again, all the quests work in conjunction, or a lot of them work in conjunction with one another. So you're going to be seeing a lot of different combinations. So even then, it doesn't really get that stale. You'd have to play the game a lot, like any other game. You'd have to play the heck out of it for it to get to that point. And also, it's a Mint Tin game, right? Like, the whole game fits in a Mint Tin. If Goblin Hour Games had released Gamma Guild as a, you know, as a small box or a medium box or even a big box game, and he added, you know, hundreds of quest cards, yeah, that would make it, I guess, more replayable, but it really doesn't need it. It doesn't need it. So it's really like the only thing I could come up with. And honestly, I wouldn't even really take that too much into consideration. You'd have to play the heck out of the game to get to that point. And again, people love Solitaire. That game has been around for, I don't even know how long, decades and decades and decades, and people still love it and still play it. It used to come stock on computers, you know what I mean? So, yeah, you're going to have a great time playing Gamma Guild, and I don't see that being too much of an issue. So there it is for Gamma Guild, guys. That is my number 10 game on the list. Cannot recommend this game enough. Highly, highly suggest that you pick this one up. Like I said, especially if you're into the sort of classic Solitaire style game. If you're new to this whole solo tabletop gaming world, this is a great entry into that world with Gamma Guild. So I highly, highly recommend that you check this game out. And I'm going to have a link for this game, as well as all the other games on this list, down in the description of this video. So if any of them, you know, spark some interest for you, be sure to head down there into the description, and you can click on the link, and it'll bring you to whatever page, whether it's you know, the Game Crafter or otherwise, where you can go pick up your copy of this game. So there it is for number 10, guys. That is Gamma Guild. Now we're going to move on to my number 9 top game for 2024. Coming in at number 9 of my top 10 favorite solo player tabletop games of 2024 is Lost Rubies of the Amazon. Dudes, this is a new game for me, guys. I just started playing this in December, so right at the end of the year. It just made it into the list. This is a fantastic game. I have been having so much fun playing Lost Rubies of the Amazon, and we're going to go over the pros and cons for this game, starting out with the pros with the game mechanics. So it's got an interesting dice manipulation mechanic in the game that I really enjoy. I'm typically not into dice games. I usually get a sort of like Yahtzee vibe from dice games, and it almost gives me the slot machine vibes. Like I mentioned earlier, it's too luck dependent. There's too much luck, and I'm just not crazy about that when there's only dice involved. When there's cards and other ways that you can mitigate the dice, I can get into that. And I think that's why I like Lost Rubies of the Amazon so much, is because while it doesn't necessarily have cards that you put in your hand to mitigate the dice rolls, you do get these little tokens in the form of supply packs and something called letters from home. And you can use those to mitigate your dice roll. So when you use your supplies, you can change the value of a single dice up or down by a number. Or if you use one of the letters from home tokens, you can change a dice value to any value you want. So it completely removes the luck in that case. But of course, the supplies and the letters from home are both a finite resource, and you as a player have to decide when you want to use those. When is the most opportune time rather to use those? Should you hang on to them for a better moment when you can affect, more dice in the game? Or are you about to lose? Are you about to lose a team member? Do you need to use it now? So it gives you that decision making, and that's what I find so enjoyable about Lost Rubies of the Amazon, is it removes a lot of the luck that you can, run into with rolling dice. But of course, it still has a bit of luck because you're rolling dice. So again, it's got a really nice balance there, and I really enjoy that, the dice manipulation mechanic in the game. Also, the turns are really quick. You go through turns really quickly. It's like you flip a card, you roll your dice, you pair up your dice to remove certain dice from the pool. And and essentially you're just trying to make your way through the Amazon jungle, and on every card, you're rolling dice, and it takes a very short amount of time to take each turn to go through each card. So you get through a game fairly quickly. I would say it probably takes about 15 to 20 minutes or so to play a full game. And maybe even shorter sometimes, depending. For me, I'm making videos of these games and I'm talking a lot and stuff like that. So if I was playing alone, I could see probably getting through it even quicker. So I would say anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes, you can get through a whole game of Lost Rubies of the Amazon. And I think that's a pretty good pro as far as the game mechanics go. It runs really smoothly, and it's got a quick pace to it, which is really, really cool. And then going over the theme, it has a very unique theme. I haven't seen any game that has a theme where you're an expedition team going through the Amazon jungle or any jungle for that matter. Like, it's got a really, really neat theme. And it's cool how some of the other things in the game play into that theme. Like you can run into a guide who's like an Amazonian native that will like guide you through the jungle, which adds an extra die to your dice pool. And he'll also absorb 1 damage for you. So that kind of, it's a cool little mechanic. And then it's themed around the game, which is really cool. When you run into danger cards that have the skull and crossbones, and you have to roll for your danger roll to see what the danger is on that card in that area, you can run into poisonous toads, or you can run into snakes or jaguars. All things that you would find in the jungle. And I think that that's really, really cool that plays into the theme as well. So yeah, very unique theme. Haven't seen anything like it, and it feels really cool. It's also cool. It's just like you're trekking through the jungle with your little exploration team, and it just feels neat. Really, really cool vibes. Really love the theme of the game. As far as the replayability goes, I think it has a fair amount of replayability. I don't think it's through the roof necessarily. You do have, I believe it is, I want to say it was 19. It's either 18 or 19 of the cards that you're going to lay out as you're going through. And so you're going to remove a couple of them each game. So for the most part, you're seeing the same ones almost every game, bar those 2 cards that you remove each time. So it does add a little bit of variability, because you are removing a couple of the cards, but it doesn't add quite as much as say in Gamma Guild, where you're using, half of your deck of cards, your quest deck. So, but with that said, I think that it still does have a fair amount of replay value. The games definitely do play out differently each time. Of course, you're rolling dice, so you're going to have different experiences. The order that the cards come up is going to be different, so that's definitely going to change the experience you have. Maybe in one game, you have to blow through a bunch of supplies, and you don't run into any supplies early on, which is going to create a unique scenario, whereas in another game, maybe, say in a similar situation, you had to use a bunch of supplies, but maybe you run into, a couple of supply cards early on, you're able to stock up again, and that's just one little scenario, one little example that can happen in, various ways in the game. So, yeah, I think it definitely has a fair amount of replay value. And also it comes with this sort of like, I call it an expansion. It's not necessarily an expansion, but it's sort of like a little add-on to the game. So kind of like a little mini expansion that comes in the tin with the game. That's not necessarily part of the base game. And it's the hunters. So you can add these 4 hunters into the game, and they essentially are led by a commander, and then there's 3 other hunters that are led by this commander, and they will track you through the jungle, as you're moving along on the cards, and they will chase you down, and when they land on the same card as you, you have to roll against their dice, and it adds difficulty to the game, and it's really, really cool. So that definitely adds some replayability to the game as well, having that extra little mode added into it. And now we're going to talk about the components and the quality. So as I mentioned earlier, for all of these games, pretty much, the quality is high, right? This is another game that you can get from the Game Crafter. So all of the cards, all of the components are high quality, top-notch stuff. And also, like with Gamma Guild, it's very compact because it comes in the tin, so you could put everything in the tin. Now, I will say this: I'm a guy that loves to sleeve the cards for his games. And I forgot to mention this about Gamma Guild too. I sleeved all the cards for Gamma Guild. If you sleeve them, they don't fit back in the tin. So that's something that you should be aware of. And same thing with Lost Rubies of the Amazon, unfortunately. If you sleeve the cards, you're not going to be able to fit the cards and all of the components back in the tin. So I put all the components for this game in like a little baggie, like a little Ziploc bag. And I just keep it with the tin whenever I'm ready to play. But otherwise, if you don't sleeve the cards, everything, to my knowledge, fits in the tin. I'm fairly certain everything will fit in the tin. So yeah, as far as the components and quality goes, great stuff there. And then moving on to the fun factor, I think the most fun thing in this game to me, aside from the dice manipulation, which is super, super fun, is like the tension in the game. Like there's definitely a lot of really tense moments, whether you're running into the sand trap or if you're trying to get a ruby, or if the hunters are chasing you, or if you're just down to the wire with, a couple of team members left and they're damaged and bruised and injured, and you've only got a couple chances left to make it before your whole team gets wiped. So that definitely adds a lot of tension to the game and a lot of, just tension and suspense. And it feels really, really cool. It's like you can really get into the experience. At least I do. It's like I imagine this team like going through this jungle, and, they're fighting against different things, like I mentioned earlier, like whether it's poisonous toads or snakes or panthers, or, or maybe it's the hunters chasing after them. So yeah, that adds to the tension in the game. And I think that makes for a really, really, really fun experience. And now we're going to get into the cons for Lost Rubies of the Amazon. I'm going to go with the game mechanics first. We're going to start there. It's heavily reliant on luck because it's a dice game. So as I mentioned earlier, you're rolling dice. It's like Yahtzee. You know what I mean? To me, like games like Yahtzee are like super casual type games. And I don't mean that in like a gatekeeper, like, like I'm up on some pedestal or something, like looking down at people that play Yahtzee. That's just a really casual game that like your parents played back in the day, on a Saturday night to pass the time. Cause you don't really have to think or do much. You just hang out with your friends and you roll some dice and whatever happens, happens. That vibe is sort of here a little bit in Lost Rubies of the Amazon, but I hesitate to even mention this as a con because, like I mentioned in the pros, you can mitigate that bad luck by using your items in the game, like your supplies and your letters from home. So this one is very, very minimal, but sometimes you are going to run into situations where it doesn't matter what you do. You're just going to get unlucky and you're going to roll bad dice and bad things are going to happen. And you know what? That happens in any game that has luck. All the games on this list can fall victim to that. And I'm sure your favorite games probably all fall victim to that at one point or another. And that's just kind of how life goes sometimes too. So it's nothing to really gripe too much about, but I thought I would mention it. It's a little bit reliant on luck, or more so maybe than other games because of the dice, because you're rolling a lot of dice every single turn. Also, it can maybe get a little bit repetitive because, as mentioned earlier, you don't have as much variability as in a game, say like Gamma Guild, like we went over. You're going to be seeing mainly the same cards every game, bar a couple cards that get removed each time. But for the most part, you're going to be seeing most of the same cards each time. So it can maybe get a little bit repetitive. The game isn't super, super deep. The playthrough loop is going to be the same every time. You're moving from card to card and essentially doing the same thing over and over again. But it's rewarding and it's really, really fun. And to me, it's really addicting. I love this game. I could just sit here and play it over and over again. So that's just a minor con that, again, like any of these games, if you play them enough, they can get repetitive. But for this one in particular, because you're doing sort of the same thing over and over again, I could see for some people, they might think that it's a little bit too repetitive. But again, the game is so fun. That's just a minor con for me personally. And then as far as replayability goes, I guess I could have thrown that into that category, right? With the repetitiveness, it can get a little bit repetitive. And then it's got sort of like minimal variety, like I've already mentioned a couple times, because you're seeing a lot of the same cards each time. And each game can kind of feel a little samey. It can feel a little bit samey. But at the same time, also, as I mentioned earlier, you're going to be running into situations that will feel sometimes drastically different than the game that you played before, depending on, how your rolls go. So the luck definitely ties into that a lot. So minimal complaints from me there as far as those cons go. And then lastly, as far as the components and quality goes, I think that while the art is definitely cool, it's maybe a little lacking, maybe just a little bit, but at the same time, I kind of like it. I think I think it's definitely intentional. Like the little characters, they don't have facial features. Obviously that was intentional and it's kind of charming in a way. And I hesitated to even throw that into the cons because it definitely seems 100% intentional. And so there's maybe just like a little bit you missing from the art. But overall, I think the art is beautiful. As you could see on the tin here, it's really cool. Like I love the color scheme. Most of it is orange, yellow, and green. And that's really cool. It definitely gives you those sort of jungle vibes. I definitely don't want to harp on that too much. It's really not that big of a deal. The art, for the most part, is really, really cool. I could just maybe see it being like a little bit more spruced up, but for the most part, I think it's really, really good. I really do enjoy it. And that's pretty much all I've got for Lost Rubies of the Amazon, guys. So again, for all of these games, don't let the cons fool you. I'm trying to be as objective as possible and just giving my honest feedback on things that I may notice. But again, it's just my own personal subjective opinion, and it's, it doesn't make it the gospel truth by any means. For the most part, I absolutely love this game. And the only reason I even had to mention those cons is because I had to sit down and make a list and actually think about it. I didn't really I don't think about that while I'm playing the game. I'm not like, oh man, I wish the tokens from my team had facial features. Like, I don't really care. Like, the game is just so fun that I don't care about that. So highly, highly recommend checking out Lost Rubies of the Amazon if you're into that style of game, sort of dice games, but that aren't 100% luck, that you can mitigate the luck of the dice rolls through your decisions. This is definitely the game for you, Lost Rubies of the Amazon. And of course, you can go down in the description and click on the link to go pick up the game if you would like to do so. So now we're going to move on to my number 8 game on the list. And coming in at number 8 on my list, guys, is Mini Moons by Diego Terran and Natasha Kononenko. Guys, I freaking love Mini Moons. I've done several playthroughs of this game on the channel, as I have for all of the games on this list. So if you've seen this one, guys, you already know what's up. Let's go over the pros and cons for this game. Of course, starting with the pros, with the game mechanics. Very, very unique mechanics, guys. It is so cool. Like, you're going across these moons, right? And they're set up in a circular fashion, which is already really neat. I haven't seen anything like that in another game before. And it's awesome. There's so many different things you can find, whether you find a mineral patch where you get to mine for minerals. So you're rolling dice to try to hit certain numbers in order to mine minerals. And then you get to flip mineral cards and you get certain amounts, or maybe you'll find a piece of technology, or maybe you'll move to a moon space that has fuel on it, or a scavenger pack that you could pick up and get energy and stuff back. It's really, really neat. So there's a bunch of little different mechanics going on in the game. Also, you've got the cat cards that you can get whenever you save the cats by giving them a cat treat. And they have different unique abilities for each cat, which is so cool. And yeah, that definitely adds to the unique mechanics in the game that I haven't necessarily seen in another game before. So very, very cool, unique game mechanics. And then we're going to talk about the theme. Again, unique. If I could use one word to describe Mini Moons, it's unique. I haven't seen any other game like this. Every aspect of it is so unique and creative and thoughtful, and I absolutely love the theme of this game. Essentially, you are like a scientist, and your spaceship with your 5 kitty cats explodes, and you just get blasted out into space, and they get spread across these moons. And it's like, you know, just the thought of that, it's so like cartoonish and whimsical, and just really, really cute. It's just such a cute game. Like, everything about it is really cool. And of course, me personally, oh man, should I even say this? I'm about to divide myself here from half of my viewer base. No, I'm an animal lover, right? I mean, I love all animals, dudes. Like, and I'm sure some of you guys know that about me by now. I point out when there's like a little bug or something on the table, and I let it live and I let it go. I want all the little creatures to live. I love and care about them, and I love cats. I love cats, but I'm more of a dog person myself. You know what I mean? But that being said, the people that are like, I know that people that are cat people, they're like fanatically cat people. Where, you know what I mean? Where, like, I don't know if I've ever met anybody that's like a fanatical dog person. I'm sure they exist, but when people are like cat people, they are cat people, and they'll tell you about it, and they'll tell you that you suck because you don't like cats more than dogs. So if you love cats, you're gonna love Mini Moons, dude. This game is adorable, and it's all revolving around you finding your cats. So you know, that's a little, you know, aside there. But yeah, if you're into that, man, you're definitely going to love the theme of this game. It is so freaking cool, and the artwork is adorable. The artwork is so freaking cute. And if I'm not mistaken, Natasha did all the artwork for the game, and she is incredible. Like, yeah, she is incredible, dude. The artwork is so professional looking, and just, it's adorable. Like, it looks so cute. It's got this really cute cartoony vibe to it, and I absolutely love it, man. It adds to the theme so much. And then as far as the replayability goes, I think it has a fair amount of replay value. I really do. You're going to be getting small moons in the first part of the game as you're starting the game. So that means that you're going to have to shuffle up the moon cards and create small moons. And there's going to be a few moon cards left over. So kind of similar to Gamma Guild, and to a lesser extent Lost Rubies of the Amazon. It's sort of in between those two. You're going to have a little bit of a different experience each time, because you're not going to be seeing the exact same moon cards each game. Plus, the way that you set up the moon cards are going to be oriented in different positions, and you're never going to know where certain cards are. So it's going to definitely feel different each time, which is, you know, going to add to that replay value. Also, there's a bunch of technology cards, and you're going to be getting different ones each time you play the game. So that's going to add a lot of replayability to the game, because it's going to create a different experience. And, you know, it's got that dice roll mechanic in there for when you're mining. So that's going to add some luck into the game, and that's going to make it feel different each time you play too. So yeah, a fair amount of replay value for sure in this game. Then we're going to go over the game components and the quality. Once again, high quality components. I don't think that Diego and Natasha got this produced by the game crafter. I don't think. I'm sure Diego will probably be watching this video. What's up, Diego? Shout out to you, dude, for Mini Moons. The game is incredible. Maybe let people know down in the comments where they can pick up the game and who created the game. If, you know, people are wanting to, you know about that, if they're interested in that. No pressure. But again, the component quality, excellent. Top-notch stuff, really good component quality. Comes with several different little components, like you got the little cat treat. You got some little tracking cubes and some dice and whatnot. Not overly complex as far as the components go. Strikes a really good balance between cards and components. So yeah, really good stuff there. And it's compact, right? So this is the third game on the list so far that is a mint tin game. So it's very compact. You can fit everything in the tin. I even have mine sleeved up. Like, we can go ahead and I'll pop this open here, and you can see I've got all my cards in here, and I've got all of the little components on the side here, and all the cards are sleeved up. Even the mini cards right here are sleeved up, and I can close it right up and everything fits in the tin. So that is a huge, huge bonus. Very, very compact little game. And then finally, moving on to the fun factor, I'm just going to essentially echo what I've been saying throughout this whole section here for Mini Moons. It's unbelievably whimsical. It's extremely cute. The theme is just adorable, and the gameplay is super, super fun. I don't know what else to say about it, guys. It is just fun. I sat there and tried to like put my finger exactly on what makes the game so fun. And it's sort of like a mystery to me almost. It has so many aspects to the game that are fun. I love the aspect of mining for minerals. I'm a huge Minecraft fan. I've been playing Minecraft pretty much since it came out for like 12 or 13 years now. So it like kind of reminds me of Minecraft. So that's just like a personal thing for me that I'm like, oh, this is cool. I'm like mining for minerals and stuff. And, you know, getting the different technology cards, finding the cats. Like when you flip over a cave and you see the little kitty cat eyes in the darkness of the cave and you got that cat tree, it's like, let's go, dude. I can get another cat and I can get another ability from the cats. It's so cool, man. It's so cool. And it's like you're rescuing your cats. It just feels good. So the game is super, super fun, man. Solid game. Yeah, love everything about Mini Moons, man. It is so, so good. So now we're going to talk about the cons, okay? Strap in. I've got one con for the game. I couldn't think of anything bad to say about it. And not bad, but just constructive, right? So as far as the replayability goes, it can maybe get a little bit repetitive. And again, like I mentioned earlier, that goes for literally every single game. So it's almost like a non-con. It's almost like it goes without saying. If you play any game enough, it's going to get repetitive. And so that should show you how much I personally enjoy Mini Moons and how highly I regard this game and how much I think it gets pretty much everything it does right. Yeah, maybe it could get repetitive, but that's about it, guys. Any of the games can get repetitive. Mini Moons is freaking amazing, dudes. Please buy this game. Support Diego and Natasha for creating such an awesome Mint Tin game. And head to the link down in the description and grab this one and add it to your collection. You will definitely not regret it. Mini Moons, A+, guys. Awesome, awesome game. And now we're moving on to number 7 on the list, guys. We're departing from the world of Mint Tin games and we're heading into the world of small box games. And this one at number 7, guys, is Jason Glover's Desolate. Dude, Desolate is so good, man. This is kind of where everything started sort of a little bit for Jason as far as a lot of the mechanics that he uses in his games. Desolate is sort of like the prototype, for lack of a better word, that sort of kicked things off. And it is such a great game, guys. So we're going to hop into the pros, my personal pros for Desolate. I want to reiterate again, everything you're hearing in this video, my personal opinion. Don't get too salty about it, guys. It'll be okay. These are just my personal opinions. Yeah, pros, game mechanics, the push your luck mechanic, dude. Come on, bro. It is so freaking good, guys. This is where it started, man. As far as I know, this is where it started, was in Desolate. So it's the whole, you know, what's behind door number, or door A, I was about to say door number A. What's behind door number A? What's behind door B? Kind of reminds me of like old game shows. Or I think there was like a particular game on The Price is Right where you could, they would show you like one set of prizes behind a curtain, and then you could either like go with that prize, or you could be like, I'm going to essentially push my luck and I'm going to pick the other prize that's behind this curtain that I can't see. It reminds me of that. It's got that kind of vibe to it. So yeah, you either go with the first card that you flip, or if you're like, ooh, I don't know about that, I'm going to try to push my luck. You might run into something better. You might run into something basically the same, or you might run into something really bad. And I love that. That adds such a tension to the game, and it gives the player the decision. It's like, well, crap, I should have just cut my losses and went with the first card when you run into bad stuff. And then when you run into good stuff, you're like, yes, I'm so glad I pushed into this. Like, it creates that excitement. It is awesome. I love that mechanic. Now we're going to go on to the theme of the game. And just real quick, there's not too much else that I wanted to mention about game mechanics. I did think about it a little bit. You know, there's some dice rolling and stuff when you're fighting enemies and things like that. And I think that that's pretty neat. But the standout thing for me is the push your luck mechanic in this game. So now we're going to go over the theme. It has a sci-fi alien theme. And dude, I'm already sold. That's it. If I just saw the cover of the game, which is, you know, what I did when I first saw it, I was like, oh, I'm getting that. I don't even need to know what the game is. I'm getting that. Like, that looks amazing. Like, look at the imagery, dude. It's like this stark black and white moon with an astronaut suit with a skeleton in it, with a skull in it. Like, that is so intriguing and so cool. And I love sci-fi stuff and I love alien stuff. So yeah, it's like these two really cool themes married together, and it creates this really, really stark and dreary and sort of creepy, sort of like horror sci-fi alien theme. And it's very, very cool, very stylized. And it sets a really cool tone. You know, it sets the tone for the game. It sets the mood for the game. Even just looking at the cover of the game. And of course, all of the cards have the same amazing artwork, the black and white artwork. And it really fits the vibe of the game, and it makes it immersive. It makes you feel like, you know, you're actually in this little world on this moon in Desolate. Very, very cool. And then as far as the replayability goes, man, I think that this game has some pretty high replayability. Not quite as much as some of the games that we're going to be getting into later on in the list, but it definitely has a fair amount of replay value, especially when you add the expansions to it. There is the Insurgents expansion, which will add a multiplayer mode, which I've honestly yet to play. I should probably try to round up a couple buddies and play that and see what that's all about, because it's probably a good time. But you can also just play it solo, obviously, as all the games on this list. And there's a couple of like little booster pack expansions that are called the Dark Matters expansion. There's Dark Matters 1 and Dark Matters 2. And those add a lot to the game. So they add like new items, like new loot that you can get, new weapons and stuff like that. And it adds some new locations from what I remember. So it's basically just adds more of what Desolate already has and makes it an even fuller experience. And yeah, it all fits right here in the base box of the game too, which is really neat. So yeah, definitely a high amount of replay value, especially with those expansions. There's a good variety of loot. You're going to be getting different loot each time you play the game, so that's definitely going to make it feel different. You're not going to have the same thing each time. Also, Jason released something called the Gnome Pack #1 just a couple months ago, I believe. It's been fairly recently. And that added some new content to like a bunch of his games, if not all of his games, and Desolate was one that got the treatment for it. And it added these little mini cards. If my memory serves me correctly, I believe they're called danger cards. I think it added 8 of them to the game. And essentially when you encounter an alien, you can flip a danger card and it acts as a sort of like modifier. Like maybe it'll give the alien more health, or maybe it'll deal more damage, and different things like that. So yeah, it definitely adds another layer of complexity to the game, and that makes the game more replayable also. There's a lot of cool little additions that go into Desolate that add to the replay value. And that's a great thing about the game, is that it has all of those expansions for it, which is really, really cool. And then also it has unique characters and loadouts. So you can create essentially like a random character loadout when you play the game, or you can use these pre-made characters that have like a sort of little like a very short little like backstory bio for each character that kind of gets you into the mood and the theme for that character, which is really cool and kind of, you know, puts you into their shoes. And then they each start with their own unique set of equipment, and it acts as a sort of difficulty level. And it even has it listed on the cards, whether it's, you know, novice, veteran, or master difficulty. And so, yeah, that adds a lot of replayability to the game as well, because you can kind of challenge yourself and say, you know, I'm going to try to go through each of these characters, play with these different equipment that's going to make the game feel different, play different. And yeah, that adds a lot of replayability. So with all of that stuff combined, man, the expansions, the loot variety, the danger cards, and the unique characters and loadouts that they have, there's a ton of replayability in Desolate. And then we're going to move on to the components and the quality. Once again, high quality. It's made by the Game Crafter. Comes in this really sturdy little small-sized box. All the cards are super high quality. You know, it comes with some dice and everything. It's dice, you know, so they're good quality dice. Yeah, great stuff there as far as the quality goes. It comes in a small box, so it's fairly compact. You can just toss it in your bag or whatever. You know, if you're traveling on a trip, very, very small footprint. So it's not going to take up much space, and it's very travel friendly. And, you know, there's minimal components. So the majority of the game is cards. You do get a few dice to keep track of some health values for the aliens and to roll for damage, and, you know, a few little tracking cubes to keep track of your oxygen and health and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, it's cards. And yeah, it all fits right here in this little box, which is great. And then as far as the fun factor goes, it's very tense, man. It it's so tense, and I think a lot of that has to do with the theme, at least for me personally. Like I don't know, I'm just very imaginative, and I really get into like the worlds in these games when I'm playing, and I love that about Desolate. It feels very stark. It feels very, horror sci-fi. So it's very tense, man. When you push your luck and that alien pops up and you've only got a little bit of health left, dude, it's like you're on the edge of your seat. Like, oh my God, am I going to die right here? Am I going to make it past this and make it out of here, man? I need to get the the fuel cells to power up the ship and get out of here. So, yeah, there's a lot of tense moments in the game, which is really cool. And it's also extremely rewarding and exciting because of the push your luck mechanic. Like I mentioned earlier, it always feels good to push your luck into something that you really need. Like if you run into one of those engine rooms and you get a power cell, that's always exciting. When you push your luck and you run into some big alien and it gets some crazy danger card that like gives them extra damage or something. Even though you're kind of in a bad spot, it's still exciting and it creates a lot of tension, which is really cool. And then there's a goal to work toward by finding all 5 of the power cells in order to power up your ship. So every time you find one, it's like you're progressing. Like there's this very tangible sense of progression because you get to actually physically pick up one of the little power cell cubes and set it on your ship tracker, which is so cool. So you feel like you're progressing through the game, and that adds just a high level of fun factor, fun value to the game, at least for me personally. I think that's really, really great. So yeah, super, super fun all the way around, from the tension and the push your luck to the more goal-oriented progression feeling of the game. Makes it very, very fun. And then moving on to the cons for Desolate. As far as the components and the quality goes, I listed something under that category, and it's the black and white art. Again, for me personally, I love the black and white art. I think it's perfect. I think if the game had color, it would actually detract from it. I think the fact that it's in black and white is a very stylized, obviously intentional choice by Jason, and I couldn't imagine it being in color, to be honest with you. But I could maybe see some people not being crazy about the fact that there's no color in the game. So I probably shouldn't have even put it in the cons, because this is my cons, right? It's not your cons. But, I wanted to put that in there just in case. You might not be crazy about that, but the art is great. I mean, look at the cover of the box, dude. It's so good. All the cards look like that. All the art on the cards are at that quality. So yeah, we're going to move right past that, because that's not even really a con, but I don't know. Some people might not be crazy about the black and white art. And as far as the mechanics go, there's a couple things with the mechanics. Now, the push your luck mechanic is fantastic, but as I mentioned earlier, I think that there are some games that we're going to go over later on in this list that do it a little bit better. And again, this was sort of like the inception of this, as far as I know, for Jason. When you push your luck, unless you run into an alien that's got like a crap ton of health, or if you push into like an engine room or something, there's a lot of times that you push into things that are sort of just like, meh, whatever. And that might not necessarily be a bad thing, because it makes it to where when you push into the things that are more impactful, it makes those moments even more impactful. It makes them even more exciting and exhilarating and tense, because it's not happening every turn. But I do think that it's maybe kind of like the scaffolding or the bare bones sort of the push your luck mechanic from its sort of inception here. So again, not really a major con, but in comparison to some other games that use this mechanic, it's maybe a little simple. And then I think maybe it lacks a little bit of depth, maybe because of that. There's not a whole lot going on. I mean, you are getting some loot here and there. You're fighting aliens, and it is great. Don't get me wrong, it's great. But again, I feel like it's more of like the beginnings of what could be this fantastic, amazing idea. And to be honest with you, with all of and that's just the base game of Desolate. If you add in all the expansions, in my opinion, it takes it to that next level. It really does. It bumps it up to that next level, especially with the danger cards being added in. That adds a lot. So those are very, very minor cons. But at the same time, I love this game, man. I love the push your luck mechanic in this game. It feels great, even though it's maybe a little bit more simple than other games. It feels fantastic. It really still holds up even today. If Desolate was the only game I had, I'd be happy. That goes for pretty much any game on this list. If it was the only game I had, I'd be content and I could just play it over and over again. So I cannot recommend Desolate enough, dudes. Of course, the link will be down in the description so you can pick up your own copy of Desolate. And yeah, guys, we're going to move on to the next game on the list. Coming in at number 6 on my top 10 solo player games of 2024 is Hope of the Stranded. Oh, baby. This game's so good. I love Hope of the Stranded. My goodness, guys. I saw this game on the Game Crafter several times when I would kind of, do my sort of check up on games and see if there's any new games that I wanted to get. And I kept seeing this one on there, and it just wasn't quite jumping out at me. And then I finally went ahead and made the plunge, got the game. Dude, it's incredible. I shouldn't have been sleeping on this game. It is so, so good. We're going to jump right into the pros for Hope of the Stranded, guys. So, of course, we're going to start out first with the game mechanics category. It is very, very unique. The game mechanics in this game are so unique. So the game has you essentially exploring a derelict spaceship because your little spaceship has run out of fuel, and you need to take a pit stop here and try to rummage around on this big, giant, derelict, abandoned spaceship that's floating through space, and you're looking for fuel rods to fuel up your own craft so that you can make it back home. So that kind of sets the stage for the game. And the way that you do that is you're moving around from room to room, and each little mini card is its own room. And you're going to roll dice to orient the room each time you enter a new room. So doors are going to be connected to certain other doorways, and it's like a maze sort of, and the layout of each ship is going to be different each time you go through. And I think that is such a really, really cool and fun, unique mechanic. Very, very unique. And it's also extremely immersive. Moving through the ship like that, actually physically moving your little character around on the cards. And yeah, you feel like you're in the ship. So it is very, very immersive. And it's also extremely tense, mainly because not only are you on this ship searching for fuel rods, there's something else on this ship. You're not alone. There's an alien creature on this ship, and it is hunting you down, guys. So somehow there is some alien creature that is just alone on the ship floating through space, and you were unfortunate enough to run into this thing. And yeah, it is 100% Alien vibes, right? Now I'm talking about the first Alien movie, which I absolutely love. I love that movie. It's one of my favorite movies ever, and this makes me feel like I am in that movie. It makes you feel like you're in Alien. You're on an abandoned ship in space, and there's an alien creature, and it is hunting you down, and it's just you and the creature. It's like you're Ridley, and you're running for your life from this creature while you're trying to get the fuel rods and escape. So it creates a lot of tension, and you move the alien at the end of each turn by rolling a die, and it moves in a random direction. So I think that's such a cool mechanic, how the alien moves, and it adds a lot of tension, especially when it starts moving closer to you. Man, it starts getting scary, starts getting really, really tense. So very, very solid game mechanics. And then the theme. Of course, it's a sci-fi alien theme. It's a horror theme, much like the last game that we went over, Desolate. 2 alien games back to back, 2 sort of like sci-fi horror alien games back to back, which is interesting. Yeah, it's solid, dude. It is so solid. Like I just talked about, it feels like you're basically in the movie Alien. It's got such a cool vibe to it. And on top of that, it's got this really awesome concept that the designer came up with, that when you're on this ship, there are like emergency lights that are still like flashing and blinking in the ship, and all of them are blue. So everything on the ship has like a hue of blue as the lights are blinking and flashing, and there's blue lights on in the ship. And all of the components in the game, which we'll get into that in a bit, everything is blue. And that's so cool, man. It's such a cool theme to have this sort of like monocolored theme for the game, and it's extremely stylized. It really sets this cool tone, and there's just something about like the sort of deep blue color. I don't know, it gives you that sort of creepy sci-fi horror vibe. Is really, really cool, man. I love that about it. And it's also got like a really simple retro art style. And I'll probably mention this in the cons, but I will admit that's kind of what put me off on getting the game at first. Is I saw the cover of the game and I was like, it didn't jump out at me. You know what I mean? It didn't quite jump out at me. But now that I have the game, I get it. Like I totally understand. I don't think it was necessarily a lack of ambition or laziness to create the art this way. I think it was probably intentional, and it's really cool. It reminds me of sort of like a retro style game, like from, I don't know, like from back in the day, maybe like the 80s or something, like a Nintendo game, like an NES game, or a game that you would have played on, you know, like an early version of Windows or something. Everything's sort of blocky, sort of pixelated looking, and just very, very simple. And to me, that's extremely nostalgic, and I like it. I really do. I really do like it. If the game had some more detailed art, yeah, I think that that would be incredible too. But I really do like the art now, especially now that I've played the game, and the gameplay is so unbelievably fun that I'm like, okay, I get it. Like, I totally get what he's going for, and I really, really enjoy that about the theme. So overall, the theme is fantastic. And then moving into replayability, the replayability for this game, for me personally, is through the freaking roof, dude. It is so, so high. There are like countless ship layouts because you're laying out the cards in a random pattern each time. Whenever you move into a room and you have to roll for the orientation of the room, the way that the rooms are oriented is going to be different each time. So, you know, that's going to make just like an almost infinite number of like maze-like labyrinthine layouts that you can go through. Adds so much replayability to it. There's a bunch of little items that you can get in the loot deck because you can find essentially like loot crates that you can open up. Sometimes you'll find sealed ones that you need to like laser cut through to open up. You might find space dust inside, which is essentially nothing. Or you might find an oxygen tank to increase your oxygen, or you might find a door key card so that you can unlock one of the locked doors, or, you know, there's all kinds of different little things that you can find in those crates, which is really cool. There's a lot of, there's a good bit of loot cards, I guess you could say. So that adds a lot to it as well. And then, of course, the alien chasing you. No two games are going to feel the same because it's just totally random. It's a dice roll, and the alien is just going to be moving randomly all through the ship. Also, you start with like different loadout items. Like you can get this little sentry drone thing that'll essentially prevent the alien from moving into the room that you set that drone in. Also, you won't have to roll for danger rolls when you move back into that room. There's a flare that you can use to like draw the alien's attention over toward the flare. There's all kinds of stuff, man. And so I think the main thing for me, though, is the fact that the ship layouts change each time, and it feels completely different. Like, you'll run into dead ends. You might run into the fuel rod, or what are they called? The shield generators, rather, where you can get a fuel rod out of it if you have the tool to do so. There's all kinds of stuff, man. It's really, really replayable. So, yeah. As far as that goes, it is like I said, the replayability for me personally, through the roof on this game. Then we're going to go over the components and the quality. Of course, Game Crafter game, goes without saying, just like all the other games, high quality stuff. Cards are high quality, comes with a bunch of little components, which is really cool. Some little tracking cubes. It comes with some dice, a very cool die too. It's like shaped like a rocket. It's like a little blue rocket that you can roll that's 6-sided. It's hexagonal. Dude, it is really, really cool, and it fits the theme perfectly. It's got like the little fuel rod bits in there, components in there. It's got the little tank for your sentry bot. It's got all kinds of stuff in there. It's got the little like mini poker chip things for your door key cards. Really, really cool. And everything is blue. All of it. All of the components are blue. All of the cards, the artwork on the cards is blue. Yeah, man, it looks great. There's a fair amount of cards and there's a fair amount of components, and I've got everything sleeved up and it all fits in the tin. It's a snug fit, but it all fits in the tin. You can see right here, all the little blue components and everything right here. And then the sleeved up cards, even the little mini cards right here. Yeah, and it all fits perfectly back in the tin. And you can close it right up and you are good to go. So it's compact. You can throw it in your pocket, you can throw it in your bag and travel with it and play that on the go. Great stuff there. Now we're going to go over the fun factor. So as I've already made pretty much apparent here, it's very tense. As I mentioned earlier, when you're moving the alien around and it's chasing you, this game is basically tense the whole time. The entire time, you're just like, oh my God, I just want to find these fuel rods and get the heck out of here. My oxygen is running low. This alien is getting closer to me. I don't know where it's going to move next turn. Is this room I'm moving into going to be a dead end? Can I even go this way? It's like tension constantly. It's like there's nonstop tension, and I love it. It is so good, dude. And it's also, like I mentioned earlier, extremely immersive, man. It's so immersive. The theme is so immersive. The fact that everything is blue, the fact that you're moving from card to card, which is basically room to room, you really feel like you're in the ship. You don't necessarily have to imagine it like you might do in some games. It's right there in front of you. Everything is laid out in front of you, and you're in there, man. You are in the ship. And yeah, so super immersive, and it's just extremely exciting, man. Like when you find loot, if your oxygen's running low and you find some oxygen in a loot crate, That feels amazing. Sometimes you find fuel rods in loot crates, which is amazing. Or you might go into a room that's got a shield generator while you've got the tool, and then you've got to roll to try to get it. And if you get it, it's exciting. It's just, there's so many moving parts, and there's so many areas of the game that sort of like have to line up in your favor in order for you to be successful, that it creates a lot of tension, and it creates a lot of excitement. So yeah, high fun factor for this game. I could just play this game all day. It is so fun. And now moving into the cons for Hope of the Stranded, for my cons anyway. As far as the game mechanics category goes, there's some luck involved for sure. And again, like all of these games, but there's maybe a little bit more luck than some of the other games, maybe, at least from my experience playing the game. And like I just mentioned at the end of the pros list there's a lot of moving parts, and a lot of things need to go right in order for you to win. If any of them go wrong, you're pretty much going to lose. It's like you need to have enough oxygen. If your oxygen runs out, you're going to lose. You need the orientations of the room to kind of line up in your favor so that you're not running into too many dead ends and having to move back into rooms that you've already been in, which if you roll and you get an even number, that's going to damage your ship integrity. So if your ship integrity goes down to 0, you lose the game that way. If the alien rolls, a bunch of unlucky rolls for you and it keeps moving closer to you and catches you, you lose the game that way. So it's like there's a lot of chances for luck to rear its head and just end the game. Even if everything else is going right, there's a lot of moving parts that if one of them goes wrong, it could end the whole game for you. So you could see that as a con, or you could see that also as a pro. And I kind of see it a little bit as both there. So there's some luck going on for sure. And then the theme, as far as like the theme and sort of the quality goes, I'll kind of lump both of those categories together. I already talked about this. The art is extremely simple. I'm sure a lot of people have probably seen this game on the Game Crafter and maybe passed right over it because the art didn't catch their eye, and it didn't seem like something that they would be necessarily extremely interested in. And I'm, like I said, I'm guilty of that too. I saw the game several times on the Game Crafter and passed right over it because the art didn't catch my eye at all. So the art is, while now I appreciate it and I enjoy it, because I feel like it's nostalgic and it gives me this retro vibe, I could see that it's maybe too simple, for some people's taste there. So that's just a little minor con that I thought I'd mention. And then as far as the replayability goes, even though there are all of these random layouts and stuff which add a lot of replayability to the game, I could maybe see it being a little bit samey, like same from game to game, just because you're sort of doing the same thing. But again, that's like every game. You're playing the same game, so of course it's going to be the same. You're playing the same game. So for me, that's not really too much of an issue. I can maybe see if I played the game, till I was, no pun intended, till I was blue in the face. I might get to a point where I'm like, I don't know, starting to kind of feel the same. I'm just going after the fuel rods, hoping the alien doesn't catch me and get out. But that's just like, that's dumbing it way down and simplifying the heck out of it. And that's really just not the case. Those are really the only minor little cons that I could even think of for this game. And I wouldn't even really take those, too much into consideration. Take that with a grain of salt. Hope of the Stranded is freaking amazing, dude. From the first time I played it, I was blown away and instantly hooked. Instantly, I was like, oh, dude, this is like one of my favorite games I've ever played. Like on the first playthrough, literally. So good. And it's kind of cool too. I'll mention this as sort of a peek behind the curtain here. There was a game that I was working on, several years ago, and I still might do it again. And I'm very inspired to dust it off since I've played Hope of the Stranded. And the game is called Home. And essentially you are in a haunted house and there is a ghost chasing you, and you move from room to room and you're looking for certain items and you're trying to escape the house. It gives me a similar vibe to Hope of the Stranded, where rather than being in a haunted house with a ghost, you're on an abandoned spaceship in space with an alien chasing you. So the games weren't exactly the same, but very, very similar. My cards had 4 ways to leave. Either you could go through the door on the left, the door on the right, a hole in the ground, or climb a ladder to go into the ceiling. I was also inspired by the game, I think it was called Spy versus Spy. It was an old NES game that I used to play, and for some reason that just stuck with me. And so the cards kind of look like that, where you move through the rooms and you can climb ladders and go up and down. And yeah, so that reminds me a lot of the Hope of the Stranded. So I think that's another reason why the game really grabbed me. I was like, oh, this is like this is like home. This is kind of like home. Like, this is really, really cool, but with a dark alien theme to it. So yeah, amazing stuff, guys. I could go on and on about Hope of the Stranded, but yeah, I can't say enough good things about this game. Definitely check this one out. Check the link in the description down below to grab Hope of the Stranded. And now we're going to move on to number 5. We're past the halfway point, guys. Let's go to the next game on the list. All right, guys, coming in at number 5 for my top 10 games that I've played in 2024. It's another Mint 10 game. This one is Dust Runner by Jason Glover. So we've got another Jason Glover game on the list. What can I say? This guy makes amazing games. This is one of the first few Mint 10 games that I played ever when I first got into this hobby late last year and earlier this year, and I believe, can't remember if I got the game in December or January, but either way, I played it mostly this year in 2024. I played the heck out of this game, and this game is so freaking good, guys. So let's jump into the pros and talk about the game mechanics. So once again, it's got the push your luck mechanic in this game, and it feels fantastic to push your luck in this game, guys. When you push, you're hoping that you don't push into some gnarly raiders that are going to attack you, or you might push into a card that lets you zoom a little bit further down the road, or maybe pick up some ammo, pick up some health, right? So there's a lot of little different scenarios you can run into with the push your luck mechanic in this game. And of course, the general idea of the game is that you have taken some intel from an enemy raider's base, and you're trying to make your way back to your home base with it, and they're chasing you down the road in this sort of Mad Max style setting, set in sort of like a sort of like cyberpunk futuristic world, which is amazing. And we're going to get into that soon too, but that's sort of like the synopsis of the game. But yeah, for the game mechanics, the push your luck mechanic, super, super solid in this game. Also, it's got these multi-purpose resolution cards in the game that have like a bunch of different uses for them. So you use them to add health to the raiders. You use them when you defeat a raider to see what loot you get. You use them to see who gets initiative in combat, if you get to attack first or if the raiders get to attack first. Yeah, you use them to see how far the raiders move, how much damage you do, how much damage the raiders do. So you can see there's all these different things that this one little card does. And that is just so cool. That is such a cool mechanic, a great mechanic. And it makes the game, it just makes the game feel really, really solid. You don't have to roll a bunch of dice. You just flip one card over, boom, it's got everything right there on the card for you. Super good. Also, it's very balanced. I feel like it's a fairly balanced game, and there's nothing in the game that's like too overpowered or anything like that. There's no items. In this case, you have modifications that you can add to your car that do different things. None of those feel overpowered to me. They all feel really balanced, and yeah, there's nothing that breaks the game. There's none of them that feel like really bad, you know, that you're like, oh man, I got this one, this is terrible. They all feel just really balanced. Everything in the game feels very balanced. So you'll definitely have some close calls, but you'll also have some games where you might get caught right out the gate in the beginning too. You know what I mean? So that definitely varies, but overall, I'd say that the game is fairly balanced. And then as far as the theme goes, man, it is so immersive. It really is, especially for me. I just imagine the whole time, like I'm in this car, I'm zooming down the road away from these raiders, and I just got to make it back to my base, dude. And I could just imagine the dust, you know, shooting up in the air as the tires are spinning out in these dunes and everything. And there's these dust worms that come, you know, barreling up out of the sands and everything. It almost reminds me of the big worm thing from Beetlejuice, or what's that other movie? Is it like Tremors or something like that? Yeah, it's really cool. These like big sandworm, dustworm things. So very immersive. And again, it's got that cyberpunk sci-fi vibe to it. And it, to me, it's almost like this 80s vibe, like, especially with the color scheme, the like magenta and cyan. I just love that sort of cyberpunk vibe. And for some reason, it's really nostalgic to me. I guess because like a lot of movies came out in the 80s that had that sort of vibe, you know, like with Mad Max, I guess is like a perfect example of that. Or, you know, even just like Star Wars and, you know, or Alien, like all that kind of stuff. It's got like this very like futuristic vibe to it. So I really love the theme of this game. I think it's fantastic. And yeah, it creates this like sense of action too, because you're like, the setting is that it's a high-speed car chase basically, so it makes it feel very action-packed and tense. Very awesome theme. And then as far as the replayability for the game, you have so many car parts to choose from. So you've got like a front, a middle, and a back for your car. And each of those cards is double-sided with a different car part on each side. So you can mix and match them up, and you can create like dozens of different combination of car parts, which is going to affect basically sort of like the difficulty level of the game and how you're going to play the game, because you'll be getting a different amount of ammo, a different amount of fuel, a different amount of hit points, and a different amount of damage you're going to do. Or some of the car parts, some of the middle car parts will let you start with an extra modification card. So that adds a ton of replayability to the game, having all of those different car parts. And then there's also these tracker cards that come with the game that allow you to play on different difficulty settings. So you earn victory points in the game when you defeat raiders, or when you pass over stars along the track, you will earn victory points, and you can spend those victory points to redraw resolution cards. So sometimes you'll run into a resolution card. Maybe the enemy has a little bit too much health, more health than you want. So you can spend some victory points, redraw one. Or maybe the raiders are going to move and catch up to you, and you can't have that or you'll lose the game. So you can spend victory points to redraw. So with these tracker cards, with the normal mode, you have to spend 2 victory points. If you do a, what is the mode? There's like a middle mode. I think it's called a night run. You have to spend 3 victory points. And if you do a fury run, which is the hardest mode, you have to spend 4 victory points. So it essentially changes the difficulty level of the game and makes you think a little bit more about, ooh, should I spend my victory points to flip a new card, or should I just take this one and hope that I'll have a better, there will be a more opportune time, a more impactful time for me to use these on a future turn. So that definitely adds to the replayability, having those different tracker cards. And then also the components and the quality for the game. Once again, high quality, comes from the game crafter. Everything is super high quality, and there's minimal components with the game. You got a couple of little cars, which is also really neat and adds to the theme because you actually get to see the little cars. You got some cubes to track things with and a couple dice to track enemy health with. But other than that, it's mainly just cards. So very, very small footprint as far as components go, and everything fits in the tin. Once again, as you can see here, I've got everything sleeved and it all fits into the tin. It takes a little bit of component Tetris to get it to fit. I've had some people comment in the past, how in the heck do you get everything to fit in there with the cards sleeved? And yeah, this is how I have to do it. But yeah, anyway, so everything does fit in the tin, even when it's completely sleeved right there. So it makes it very compact. You can toss it in your pocket, toss it in your bag, and travel with it. Makes it a great little travel game to play, and it's quick to play also. And then we're going to get into the fun factor for Dust Runner. Much like the past couple games I've talked about, it's tense. Apparently I like tension in games, and this one is very tense as well. Again, it's a high-speed card chase. You've got this enemy raider car that's hot on your tail, especially when they start moving down the track and they get like 1 or 2 spaces behind you. Oh man, does it make it tense when you're flipping over cards from the exploration deck to see what's going to happen. And yeah, it adds a ton of tension to the game. Also, when you get into combat with the raiders, that definitely adds a lot of tension to the game because you have to spend ammo to flip your resolution cards, and it does a random amount of damage when you flip them over. So that definitely adds to the tension and makes you question, ooh, how much ammo should I really spend right here? Should I kind of be conservative with it and just hope I get lucky? Or should I just go all out and spend a bunch of ammo and then guarantee that I'm going to kill this raider? So that adds a lot of tension to it too. And yeah, it's just, I can't overstate that enough. It's a high speed chase and it adds a lot of tension to the game. So that makes it super, super fun. And of course, that push your luck mechanic makes it super fun. It's always fun gaining new modifications for your car. It's just fantastic. Every aspect of the game to me is just super, super fun. There's never a moment where I'm like, oh, this is boring, or it feels, like this is boring. It just always feels fun. Now we're going to move into the couple of cons that I jotted down for Dust Runner. And the first one is, while for me, it's not a con, this is more like maybe a general con that I've noticed, and I actually mentioned this because this game was in my top 5 Mint Tin games video from a few months ago, is the theme. Now, while I love the sci-fi cyberpunk theme, it's also got a heavy car theme, and I'm not really into cars, but for some reason, I really enjoy it in this game. I think it's because it's more like futuristic. It's not like modern. I'm not really into like modern cars. It just doesn't interest me. But I could see that theme might not be, it might not make people, that interested in the game. Also because, and this, again, this is sort of anecdotal. This is just like from my own personal experience, and it's unfortunate, but my Dust Runner playthroughs typically don't get as many views as when I do some of my other sort of like fantasy themed games. Those games perform much better. And I think it's just that people in general like fantasy themes more than they like sci-fi themes. And I had someone in my Discord, a viewer of the channel. I'm so sorry, your name is eluding me right now. They mentioned that, and this is a very valid point, and they had a good theory. They said that the reason that they think most people prefer the fantasy stuff is because it kind of pulls you out of reality and pulls you out of real life, whereas sci-fi themes or like these cyberpunk themes, they're a little bit more grounded in reality, even though they're, futuristic seemingly and seem, sci-fi. With today's world, with AI and, these robots and Tesla robots and everything that's getting made now, it doesn't seem so futuristic anymore. It seems all a little too real now. And it kind of came on suddenly. So not to get too philosophical or, get off into the weeds about that stuff, but I think that's a very valid point. And that could definitely be part of the reason why people aren't drawn as much to the sci-fi stuff as they are to the fantasy stuff. So the theme, at least from the perspective of my channel and uploading videos and the views that I get on my stuff, Dust Runner unfortunately doesn't perform that well. And the only reason I could think is because it's the theme, because everything about the game is incredible. I think that if you replaced the cars with, I don't know, horses or something, and you were, a wizard or a knight or something chasing the other knight or something like that, and it was like fantasy themed, and instead of dust worms coming up out of the ground, it was like dragons or something, people would probably be all over it. Because it kind of pulls you out of everyday life and pulls you into that fantasy world. So again, I don't want to harp on that too much because I personally love the theme. I think it's incredible, and I wish more people would give it a chance because it is so, so good. And then the last thing in the category for replayability, again, this goes for any game. I keep repeating myself. I'm a broken record at this point, but it can maybe get a little bit repetitive. There's not a lot of you're not seeing different things each game. It's not like in, say, Gamma Guild, for instance, I think is a great example of this where, going all the way back to the beginning with Gamma Guild, you're only seeing half of that quest deck each game. In Dust Runner, you're seeing the whole exploration deck every game, and you're seeing it over and over again because once you exhaust it, you shuffle it up and you go through it again. Now, you're not always going to flip the exact same cards as you go through every time because you're pushing your luck. You're setting down 2 cards and you're choosing one. And sometimes you'll choose that first card so you won't know what the second one is, so you won't see it that time through the deck. But, I could see it maybe getting a little bit repetitive. And I've had other people comment that before, like I'm on the fence about getting Dust Runner. I've watched your playthrough, but it seems really repetitive. For me, it's not repetitive. For me personally, I don't get tired of the game. I could just play this game all freaking day long and not get bored with it. But again, so those 2 points, those 2 cons are more so from feedback from viewers over this past year, making videos and doing playthroughs of Dust Runner. But for me personally, none of that stuff really applies. I love the theme. I don't think it's repetitive for me personally, and I think it has a high replay value. So I can't recommend Dust Runner enough, guys. It is so solid. It has got some really interesting, intuitive, and creative mechanics going on, and I highly, highly recommend that you check this one out. I think Jason Glover knocked it out of the park with Dust Runner. So link down in the description so you can grab your own copy of Dust Runner, and we're going to move on to the next game on the list. Coming in at number 4 in my top 10 list for the games that I've played in 2024. This is a twofer, guys. We're getting 2 games in one on this one, and it's a Tin game. Once again, this one is Tin Helm and Tin Realm. I can't say enough good things about this game. I've already talked about this till I was blue in the face in my top 5 favorite Mint Tin games video. This was the number 1 game in that video. And I lumped both of these together because they're sort of like a continuation of one another. Tin Realm is a direct sequel to Tin Helm, and you can play a game of Tin Helm and then use your same character, your same items and gear and everything that you picked up and go straight into a game of Tin Realm. So I really just lump both of these games together. If you get one, honestly, I feel like you got to get the other, man. It creates an even fuller experience. So we're going to go over the pros for the game, starting with the game mechanics category. Once again, push your luck. If you can't tell, I love games that have a push your luck mechanic in it, and this game has that in it, and I think it is fantastic. So it does it extremely, extremely well. I don't need to harp on it too much more than I already have. It's got a solid push your luck mechanic in Tin Helm and Tin Realm. And yeah, it feels fantastic in this game. Also, the combat, man, the combat mechanics in this game are really solid. It's cool that as you go deeper into either the dungeon or further down the trail in the overworld in Tin Realm, and as the days pass by, depending on what level of the dungeon you're in or what day you're on, the enemies will get harder because their health will increase by 1, depending on, you know, what level you're on. So the combat mechanics are also really interesting in the sense that on your character, you've got essentially 3 different amounts of energy that you can spend in order to deal 3 different damage values. So it's up to the player to decide how much damage they want to add to their roll, because you're also going to roll dice and you're going to add your base damage from the energy that you spent to your roll. So there's like a determined value that you get to determine, and there's some luck randomness in there because you get to roll the dice. So it's like a perfect combination of the two, of the luck and also of your own decision making, and it makes the combat really interesting. And also the enemies have different abilities and stuff, so that makes the combat feel really interesting too. And then your decisions matter in this game, guys. When you want to push your luck, if you want to just stick with the first card you get, or if you want to try to push your luck into the second card, you get to decide that. When you get to use your items, you get to decide that. If you want to drink your potion now to heal, or if you want to save it till later, you can decide to do that. When you use your food, you get to decide when you want to eat the food, or if you want to hang on to it and wait till later. That's all up to you to decide how much energy you want to spend in combat, and on and on. There's all these different little decisions that you can make in the game, and that all impacts the outcome of the game, in spite of there, you know, of course, being luck because there's dice and cards. So yeah, your decisions absolutely matter in the game. So solid game mechanics there. And then for the theme of the game, it's really stylized, and much like with Desolate, Jason Glover's other game that was on the list earlier, we're back to the black and white art style for this one. So everything in the game, in both of these games, Tin Helm and Tin Realm, it's all in black and white. And I personally like that. It gives it like this dark, creepy vibe, this sort of like gritty vibe. And I love that, man. It's very stylized. And it has a sort of like semi-classic D&D feel to it, I guess. It gives me those vibes anyway. It's more rooted in that sort of classic fantasy world. And the art definitely depicts that really well. And once again, the black and white, it's great. I really enjoy the black and white theme of the game and just the whole fantasy vibe of the game. So as much as I love sci-fi stuff and the cyberpunk stuff, like most people, fantasy themed stuff is my favorite. I grew up on that. I grew up playing D&D and all that kind of stuff. You know, I love all that type of stuff. And this game does that really well. That's the vibe, that's the world and the setting and the theme for both Tin Helm and Tin Realm. And it's cool that in Tin Helm, you're down in the dungeon. And then if you survive and you make your way out, then you go into a game of Tin Realm and you're in the overworld in Tin Realm. So you've got these two totally different locations. One is more claustrophobic and it's down underground in a dungeon. And then you make your way out into this more expansive open overworld setting. And so yeah, that adds to the theme too. It's very neat, especially when you have both of the games together and you go from one right into the next. So that's it for the theme. As far as the replayability goes, I feel like this game has extremely decent replay value. There's so many different character combinations that you can make. There's going to be a class on one side of the card and then a race on the other. And there's a bunch of different combinations, guys. Like there's so many different combinations. And then each one starts with different starting gear. So depending on which class and race you play, you're going to get different gear to start the game with. So that adds a ton of replay value. Each character has their own single unique ability that you can use. So that's going to add to the replay value as well. There's a bunch of enemies, especially when you combine Tin Helm and Tin Realm together. It doubles the number of enemies. All the enemies have different stats. They have different unique abilities that they do to make them feel unique and different. So yeah, ton of replay value as far as that goes. And you know, it's the push your luck mechanic. So you're going to be running into different scenarios as you push your way into different cards in the dungeon. So yeah, and there's different locations. Like you can run into the Pigman, and if you've got a turnip on you, you can give him that and he'll give you a shard, which of course you need the 3 shards in order to beat the first half of the game in Tin Helm. You can find campsites. You can find the mushroom grove where you can pick mushrooms, or maybe you'll get lost in the labyrinth and have to eat some of your food. So there's a bunch of different little locations that add to the replayability, and it makes each game feel unique and different. And also there's loot scarcity. So you're not going to be picking up loot left and right. And in Tin Helm and Tin Realm, it's like when you finally get a piece of loot, it feels incredible. It's like, oh yes, finally, I found something. Like finding any kind of loot in the game feels so good, and gives you just a little bit of an edge and bumps up your power level, whether you find, a shield to mitigate 1 extra damage, or, maybe you pick up a sword, which is a really powerful weapon that's going to let you, deal more damage in combat. And, or, maybe you find a health potion and you're able to heal. But when you do find that loot, it feels great because the loot is pretty scarce. So I like that. I think that's a great component of the game that adds to the replay value. You're not going to be seeing every single piece of loot every single time you play and getting tired of it quicker. It's like, just get everything every time. So that adds a lot to the replay value. And then we're going to move on to the components and quality. Once again, high quality components. Both of these games are produced by the game crafter, so everything is top notch there. The artwork is incredible. It's Jason Glover. What can you expect? I think Tin Realm, the art is even better. Obviously, he made that game, quite a while after Tin Realm, so his art. His art style has improved since then. He's improved on his craft with drawing, and you can even see like from the covers, like not detracting from the Tin Helm cover at all. It's great, but you can see there's way more detail in the Tin Realm cover. But yeah, both games together, excellent artwork. It's got that black and white, dreary, sort of stark vibe to it, and it fits perfectly with the theme. It is absolutely perfect, and it's super nostalgic. That black and white vibe. Especially with this, because it's set in a fantasy world, it definitely gives me old school nostalgic vibes. Like, I don't know, like pen and paper vibes. You know what I mean? Like back in the day, you're hanging out with your buddies and, making D&D campaigns, and you're drawing different characters and stuff like that. And, lots of times with me, it was either just pencil or pen on a piece of paper. So it gives me that vibe. It kind of brings me back to those simple times with the black and white art, which I really, really love and enjoy. Also, as far as the components go, it's got a bunch of little tracking cubes and some dice and stuff, and it feels good, man. Using the little tracking cubes to keep track of all of your different stuff, like your energy and your health, what day it is or what level you're on in the dungeon, all of that kind of stuff. So I really enjoy that, the sort of tactile feel of having the little components to keep track of all of that stuff. And it all fits in the tin. Now I've got both of the tins here, and if you see here, I can open them up, and I've got basically all the stuff spread out between the two tins here. So I can fit all of the cards from both games into each tin, and then I've got all the components in the sides there, and everything is sleeved up. I should probably also mention too that I remove all of my instruction cards from my tin games because unfortunately those won't fit most of the time back in the tin if everything is sleeved up. So I actually have a tall mint tin that I have all of my instruction cards in from all of my mint tin games that I keep separate. And if I ever need to reference a rule from a game, I just go into that tin and I sift through it and I find the rule cards for that particular game. But yeah, so if you remove those, everything fits perfectly in the tins there. Also, I have the mats for these games because I have to. I'm a huge nerd, and if the game has a mat, I have to have it. And so a lot of the tracker cards, those also don't fit very well in the tin if everything is sleeved. So that's something to keep in mind. That's pretty much it for the components and quality. Very high quality all around, from the art to the actual materials themselves. And then we're going to move into the fun factor category. This game is very content rich. There is so much content to the game. There's a bunch of loot. There's a bunch of enemies. As I mentioned earlier, with Tin Helm, you're down in a dungeon, so you've got all of these map cards that you're moving through that are representative of the different rooms or areas in the dungeon. There's a bunch of different outcomes because there's essentially 4 outcomes on the back of each card. So a ton of content. Then, of course, when you move into Tin Realm, you've got all the overworld cards. It's got the cool new mechanic where you have to try to connect the little semicircular half circle symbols on the sides of the cards to create one whole cohesive symbol, whether it's the mountains or the water or the trees or, God forbid, the skull, which is bad. So that adds a lot of content to the game. And just all around, it feels big, it feels immersive, And yeah, I can't overstate that enough. There's a lot here in both of these games, especially combined. And of course, the push your luck mechanic. I could just say that over and over again for these games that have the push your luck mechanic. That is so fun to me. It creates a lot of tension, creates a lot of excitement, and it creates a lot of player decision, which adds to the overall experience and the overall fun factor for the game. So yeah, this game made it to my top my top spot or my top 5 Mint Tin Games video for a reason. It is unbelievably fun, unbelievably solid. Cannot recommend it enough. Okay, now we're going to get into the cons for Tin Helm and Tin Realm here. And once again, this is similar to the con that I mentioned for Desolate earlier on in the list, and it's the black and white art. Now, I personally love it. I love the black and white art. I think it's fantastic, but even more so than in Desolate, whereas in Desolate, I'm like, I don't even need color at all. I think it would be kind of cool if there was like a color version of Tin Helm and Tin Realm. Now, I do love the black and white sort of nostalgic pen and ink or you know, pen and paper style to the game. So, and I'm used to it like that. And it'd probably be kind of weird actually to see it with color, but that might be something that people aren't crazy about, is that it's just black and white and might look a little plain or bland. But again, I don't think it's a big deal. It really doesn't detract from the game, but it would be kind of interesting to see a little bit of color. And then this was also a pro that I mentioned, and I also mentioned this back in my top 5 Mint Tin game video, is the loot scarcity. Now, while I do think that this is a pro overall, sometimes you will have games where you just like don't find any loot and it feels kind of bad, because it's fun to find loot. Finding loot is fun. It's really enjoyable. And this game can be, you know, just straight up due to bad luck, stingy, I guess, for lack of a better word on the spot. It's not intentionally stingy. Obviously, the game's not, you know, cognizant and aware, at least I don't think. Sometimes it sure seems like it with some of these dice rolls I get, but yeah, the point still stands. I think overall it's good that there's loot scarcity, because even if you do get a game here and there where you don't find loot, when you go into another game and you find loot, you're like, oh yes, this feels so good. So again, very, very minor con. One of the very few things, one of the couple things that I could even think to mention, because everything about Tin Helm and Tin Realm is fantastic. And even both those cons for me are actually pros. It just depends on which perspective you're looking at it from. So yeah, guys, Tin Helm and Tin Realm are absolutely amazing. Fantastic dungeon crawler. If you're into the D&D fantasy vibes, if you're into dungeon crawlers, a game with a great luck versus sort of strategy and skill, I guess, for lack of a better word, ratio, that's full of content and that feels big, even though it comes in a little mint tin. Tin Helm and Tin Realm are definitely right up your alley. I highly recommend checking both of these games out. So we're going to move on. We're getting into the top 3 now, dudes. We're going into the big dogs here. This is going to be the top 3 of the top 10 games that I played in 2024. Let's hop into number 3. Coming in at number 3 for my top 10 picks of the games that I played in 2024 is Rogue Dungeon. Oh man, this game is too good. I sound like a broken record, man. Every game that comes up, I'm like, oh man, this game's so good. But it's true, man. All of these games are absolutely amazing. Clearly, they made it to my top 10 games list. Rogue freaking Dungeon, dude. Oh my gosh. From the first time I saw this online and I saw a playthrough video of it, I was like, well, I have to have that. I have got to get my hands on this game. This game looks like freaking Diablo 2 in solo player tabletop game form. I have to have it, dude. And it does not disappoint, guys. So we're going to hop into the pros and go over the game mechanics first. The game mechanics, man, where to even start, dude? I've got several points here, guys. It is deep. This is a deep game, guys. So unlike some of the other games on the list that may be kind of easy to learn, and we'll get into this a little bit later on, this game's got some rules, man. This game has got some rules to it. It's not overly complicated. It's not going to bog you down too much, but it's deep, dude. It's in comparison to some of the other games that we've mentioned on the list, pretty much every other game that we mentioned on the list. This one might be the deepest. I actually think it is. It's even deeper than, this is the deepest game on the list, even more so than the number 2 and number 1 spot on the list that we're going to get into here shortly. This game is deep, man. It is fantastic. It's got a lot of really solid rules and mechanics to the game. Yeah, the combat system is fantastic. The exploration system is fantastic with the different map cards, and the sort of gem mechanic, I guess you could call it. There's like these different colored gems in each room, and there are 6 different decks of cards that correspond to those gem colors. Some of them are like combat cards, the red ruby gems, or sometimes you'll run into like merchants whenever you go into the rooms that have the sort of rectangular diamond gems in them. So yeah, there's a lot going on there. There's a bunch of different characters and different skill cards and all kinds of stuff, guys. So the mechanics there are very, very deep, and the combat mechanics are fantastic too. And then, as I mentioned, the map cards, not only do they have like, the rooms where you can fight enemies or run into merchants or maybe find treasure, there's also traps, which is really cool. You'll run into like these little yellow gem rooms that have traps in them. And some of the traps are persistent, meaning that they hang around. Like it might be like a swinging blade trap or like a lake of fire. So each time you pass through that room or through that section of the map, if you want to pass back through it, that trap is still there. So you've got to deal with that trap again. I think the persistent trap mechanic is fantastic. I love that mechanic in this game. So cool. And also much like in Tin Helm and Tin Realm, your decisions matter in this game, man, a lot. I think even more so in this game. So when you want to use your items, and there are a bunch of them. There's so many different items that you can use for different scenarios, depending on what cards you flip when you move into different rooms, whether it's a torch that you want to use to light up a pitch black room and search for loot, or if it's like a piece of bread that you want to give to an injured dwarf that you found so that he can become part of your team and become one of your henchmen. There's so many items. You have so much player choice over when you want to use those items. Also, your armor. You'll find armor, and you can discard armor pieces to mitigate damage. So that's totally up to you when you want to use those. If you want to use them, in a certain situation, or if you want to hang on to them because the deeper you go, the more tough and strong and hard hitting the enemies are going to become. So you might say, maybe I want to actually hang on to this piece of armor to use it against an enemy later on. That gives you a lot of autonomy and player decision when you want to use your skills. Each character starts with 3 different skills, and you can use those whenever you want. And as you level up, you get new skills, or you gain access to those 3 skills. When you want to spend your XP, and what you want to spend it on, because you've got essentially 4 different stats that you can affect, whether it's your strength or your intellect or your agility or your overall health, your maximum hit points. You get to decide how much of your experience points that you earn from killing enemies to spend in which of those attributes you want to increase. You could go all out and just dump everything into strength if you want to, or dump it all into, your health, or you could kind of level it out and put a little bit here and a little bit there and try to keep everything balanced. It is all totally up to you, and the game is going to play totally differently depending on the decision that you make in regards to that. Also, you start with camping gear. You can decide when to camp. Do you want to play it safe and camp on the stairs at the beginning of the level so that way you don't get jumped by an enemy? Or do you want to make a split decision, decide, nope, I'm running low on health. I've got to camp here right in the middle of this room in this level and cross my fingers and hope that I don't get jumped by an enemy. That is totally up to you to decide to do that. You get to decide which rooms you want to enter, which way you want to go on the map cards. If you want to cross back through one of those persistent trap rooms that we talked about a little while ago, or if maybe you'd rather go a less optimal route and go around it and have to go through some other rooms and get in some fights first. All of that is up to the player to decide. And there's more, man. There's other things I'm sure I'm not even thinking about, but there's so much player decision in the game. It's fantastic. It feels great. So the ending of the game is not just up to luck and dice rolls. Sometimes it is. Sometimes that's definitely going to happen, but a lot of it is also up to you and your player decisions that you make during the game. Now we're going to go over the theme category here. And once again, probably even more so in this game than in Tin Helm and Tin Realm, it's got those classic fantasy D&D vibes, man. You're going to see a lot of familiar faces in here that you're used to seeing in that world. Whether it's ogres or goblins or wolves or spiders or, sirens, whatever it may be, beholders. There's all kinds of stuff in here. And it all falls into that sort of world, that fantasy world. And the art is awesome, guys. So I actually have the 2nd edition version of Rogue Dungeon. When the first one came out, There seemed to be a little bit of, I at least saw this sort of in the community feedback. People were saying that the art wasn't like very cohesive. Like some of the cards looked like they were more like hand-drawn traditional art. Other ones kind of looked like they came from like a PlayStation 1 game. They almost looked like 3D, like CGI or something. So the art was a little bit all over the place, but they redid all of the art for the second edition. And it basically kept the exact same, like it's still the same. It's not like they drew like completely wildly different cards or different art. It's like essentially the same characters and everything and their same poses and stances and stuff, but completely redrawn. So all of that is new and all of it is so cohesive and it looks fantastic. And you can even just tell by the cover of the box, it's very, very, very good art. I absolutely love the art in this game. Very detailed. All the lighting and shadows and everything on the cards just looks fantastic. It's super immersive. Beautiful. I could go on and on about the art. The art in this game is arguably probably the best art that I've seen in like any of the games on this list. I absolutely love it in regards to that. If you're going for like super detailed art, it is super, super good. Of course, that's all subjective, but yeah. And then, yeah, it's completely immersive, extremely, extremely immersive, especially now that everything is cohesive. And then we're going to move on to the replayability portion of this pros list here for Rogue Dungeon. Dude, the replay value, when I said that, what was it? I said something was through the roof. I believe it was Hope of the Stranded. I think it was Hope of the Stranded. I've already forgot. It's that goldfish memory kicking in, guys. If you're a long time viewer of the channel, you know how that goes. Dude, the replay for this one, if that game's through the roof, this one's through the roof and then through the stratosphere into outer space. For me anyways, guys, the replay value for Rogue Dungeon is crazy, dude. Like, there's so many freaking characters. There's so many different skills and stuff that they have, which is really cool because they each get the 3 different skills. There's like a crap ton of cards in the game. The loot deck is ridiculous, dude. Like, I don't know how many cards are in the loot deck. It's got to be at least 100. Like, it's insane the amount of loot in the game. It's so freaking cool, guys. Like, when you draw a loot card, you don't know what you're going to get, man. Like, it could be anything. It could be a different piece of armor. It could be a potion. It could be a piece of bread. It could be garlic. It could be a torch. It could be a rope that you can use for a particular thing. It could be just so many different things that I'm not even thinking of. There's too many things, guys. So many loot cards makes it highly replayable because every time you play through, you're going to be getting new stuff. It's going to make the experience different. Oh, there's scrolls also. There's all kinds of stuff, dude. Also, there's multiple map cards. So you're going to be going through these different levels of the dungeon, but there's a bunch of different map cards and you're only going to see a few of them each game. So it's going to feel different every time you go through. Like, the dungeon is going to be different each time you go through it. So that adds a lot to the replay value also with the map cards. Also, there's tons of enemies. There's separate decks for each enemy. So like when you're on level 1 of the dungeon, there's a whole deck with just level 1 enemies. Then when you go to level 2, there's a level 2 enemy deck and so on and so forth, all the way up to level 5. And then there's even a boss deck that has, I think, like 8 different bosses or something like that in it. Dude, there's so many enemies. So that's another thing. When you're going through the levels, you're not going to run into the same enemies every playthrough. You're going to be running into different enemies all the time. So that adds so much replayability to the game with all of those different enemies and bosses. All of the characters, like I already mentioned, and their skills. And then there's different modes in the game, which is really cool. So you can go through like the dungeon mode where you use cards that have the dungeon symbol on them, or you can go through the tomb mode. There's like a whole other set of cards that have a tomb symbol on them. So it's like you're going through these tombs, and then there's different enemies that come along with that. There's different loot cards and things that you can find that come along with that. And then there's also this really cool mode that I actually haven't played yet, and I really need to do it. I need to do a playthrough of this on the channel. I've been meaning to. When you flip over the player boards, because the game comes with several player boards, that's another cool thing about the game. You could play it solo, or you could play it with up to 3 people. But on the flip side of those player boards, it has a whole dungeon layout. So rather than playing the normal mode of the game where you're going through each map card one at a time, you can play this one big expansive dungeon level that you start at one section in and then work your way through all of these different rooms. So it's basically like a bunch of map cards all linked together, but it's all laid out on the back of the player boards. And dude, that is so freaking cool. I'm so excited to try that mode. Like I said, I haven't tried it yet, so I can't speak on it too much, but I think that all of that adds to the replayability. All of that stuff, guys. All the different modes, all the characters, the tons of loot, the tons of different rooms that you can, the room cards that you can enter, all the map cards, all of that stuff. It adds so much replayability to the game. No two plays are going to feel the same in Rogue Dungeon. Now we're going to move on to the components and the quality. Super, super high quality stuff. The box is really sturdy. All the cards are very high quality. The game comes with a crap load of components, a bunch of little tokens to keep track of all kinds of stuff. It comes with dice. It comes with even little individual unique meeples depending on what character you play as. Like, it comes with all kinds of stuff, dude. So tons of components, tons of cards. It's all really high quality. And as mentioned earlier, the artwork is super, super high quality, especially in the second edition of the game. Now we're going to move on to the fun factor. This is the final category here for Rogue Dungeon with the fun factor. Once again, it is tense and very exciting, much like several of the past few games that we've gone over. Lots of tension when you get into combat, when you push into certain rooms, if there's a particular trap that you need to get past, rolling to try to pass the skill checks and ability checks for certain traps and cards adds a lot of tension to the game. Yeah, so there's a lot of tension with it. There's not a push your luck mechanic in the game, but it makes up for it with the combat and, running into traps and other things like that for sure. So yeah, definitely a lot of tension. Very exciting. Of course, getting loot is always exciting. So yeah, can't speak highly enough on that point. Also, there's a good mix of luck and strategy in this game. Again, it's you could put this broken record on repeat over and over again. It's got cards, it's got dice, there's luck in the game. With the cards and the dice, there's going to be luck in the game. But you can mitigate a lot of that luck. You know what I mean? You can definitely mitigate a lot of that luck with your armor pieces that you can use to, stop damage. And again, all those things I mentioned earlier with player decision, that all factors into you being able to sort of mitigate, the luck of drawing certain cards, or, rolling some unfavorable dice rolls. So I think it's got a great mix of the luck and strategy there. Also, as mentioned earlier, it's very, very immersive. That adds to the fun, of course. The artwork is fantastic. The player board that you have everything set up on, that totally reminds me of Diablo 2, and it's got this sort of old, almost computer game style to it with the graphics and everything. It immerses you into the game. At least it does me. I'm totally immersed when I'm playing Rogue Dungeon, and I really feel like I'm in this world. I'm in this dungeon with this character, and I'm going through it, man. I'm trying to get out of there, trying to make it out alive while I'm fighting all these enemies and collecting loot and all that good stuff that you do in a dungeon crawler. And also adding to the fun factor is the leveling system. The leveling feels so good. Like I mentioned again earlier, you get to decide what you want to allocate your experience points to your attributes, and it feels awesome. Like, it's such a rewarding leveling experience in this game. I haven't seen anything quite like that in any other tabletop game, at least none of these, sort of smaller box, medium box solo player games like this. So yeah, the leveling system is fantastic in Rogue Dungeon. It feels really, really good. Now we're going to get into the cons of Rogue Dungeon. So we're going to start with the game mechanics here. As I started out saying, the game is deep. It might be a little too deep for some people. It's a bit rule heavy. Again, if you're into these types of games, it's not going to be that bad. You'll probably most likely appreciate the depth of the game. But it's not, and don't take this as a slight at all to Gamma Guild. It's not Gamma Guild. Gamma Guild you could pick up and learn really, really quickly, like a game of solitaire, and that's exactly what that game is going for. That's what Goblin Hour Games was going for with that game. It's very accessible, very easy to pick up and learn, and super fun. Rogue Dungeon, that's something for, maybe a little bit more of a die-hard, for lack of a better word, sort of enthusiast to these types of games. There's a lot of little rules in there. There's a bunch of different abilities and effects that the enemies have, where when you roll certain numbers, they'll do certain effects. Like they might get stone skin, or they might paralyze you, or there's like a whole list in the rulebook. I always have to refer to that list in the rulebook, which is cool. It's handy that in the back of the rulebook, it's got all of them listed in order. So, that's just an example. There's a lot of stuff like that, a lot of little rules to go over. But man, once you get it, and once you get in the flow of it, it's really not that bad. You kind of just start going through the motions, and you're like, oh, it's really not that bad. It's not that dense. But in comparison to pretty much the other games that we've gone over on the list so far, and probably any of the games on the list, honestly, yeah, it's a little rule heavy. And then of course, you've got, the luck of the roll and the luck of the draw that I keep harping on. The fact that the game doesn't have push your luck, I don't know if it necessarily skews it a little bit more in the luck factor there because, as mentioned so many times, you've got so much autonomy. The player decision factors into it so much, but there is not that push your luck mechanic. So when you move into a room and you flip over a card, that's what you get. It is 100% up to luck. You don't get any choice whether or not you want to deal with that and go, well, I want to decide that I want to take the chance and take the risk and I don't want to deal with this. I want to push into it something else. You don't get that option here. What you get is what you get. So, there's obviously some luck of the draw there. You're going to shuffle up the cards and it's going to be totally random what you run into. And there's not much you could do about that aspect of it. So might be a con, but again, all the other things in the game that give you player decision really make up for that. So it's not that big of a deal at all, honestly. And then as far as the components and quality goes of the game, even though everything is high quality, there's a lot of components. So that might not be something that most people are into. It takes a little bit to set up the game. I think more so than any game, definitely more so than any other game on the list. It takes the most to set up. And honestly, it's really not that bad. The setup isn't that bad. This is more just in comparison to the other games on the list. There's a ton of little tokens and stuff that you need to kind of separate when you dump everything out of the bags and set everything up. So that might be something, that's a slight con, but it makes it worth it. Once it is set up and you're ready to go, it was worth it. It was worth setting it all up and doing it. And of course, it comes in this sort of small to medium box here. So it's still relatively compact. I mean, you could totally throw this into your backpack or your suitcase if you make room for it, if you're traveling. So it is still compact enough to travel with, but might be a little bit of a con that it's not a mint tin game or a necessarily small box game like Desolate. But again, it's not much bigger. So it's really nitpicking. It's not much of a con there. And that's really it, guys. That's the only things I could think of to even kind of objectively say, as far as critiquing Rogue Dungeon. I can't speak highly enough about this game. I know I keep saying that about a lot of these games, but this one is, get this game. Get it, dude. If you were into dungeon crawlers, this game is just, it's good, man. We're about to get into my number 2 game, and I'm going to be honest with you. I had to think hard about this one, guys. Rogue Dungeon almost made it to number 2. It is so good. It's just it's right on the edge. It is right on the edge. I could almost interchange number 2 and the number 3 here with Rogue Dungeon. It's fan-freaking-tastic, dude. So Cerberus Gate Games, rather, absolutely crushed it with Rogue Dungeon, especially with the second edition of the game. You gotta get it, dude. If you were into dungeon crawl fantasy games, solo player games, and you can play it with your friends if you want to, you gotta try Rogue Dungeon. Cannot recommend it highly enough. So I'll have a link for that one down in the description as well. You can go over to their website and pick this one up if you're interested. And now, guys, we're gonna get into the number 2 game. We're almost done, dudes. Thanks for hanging out with me, guys. I know there's a bit of a lengthy video, but I really wanted to give you a solid objective take on my 10 games. I didn't want to just breeze through them and give you a shallow surface level take. I wanted to delve deep into these games and give you my personal thoughts about all of these different aspects of the game, the mechanics and the fun factor and replayability, all of that. So we've only got a couple left here, guys. Let's head into our number 2 spot on the list. Coming in at number 2 on my top 10 games of 2024, guys, is none other than Iron Helm. Guys, this is what started it all right here. Iron Helm started this whole journey for me into this awesome world of solo player tabletop games. I had no clue any of these games existed before I found out about Iron Helm. One day, I happened to think, you know what? I want to make a game that is like Diablo 2, but a board game that I could play by myself. And if you can't tell, because I've already mentioned it several times, I really like Diablo 2. I love Diablo 2. As a matter of fact, I just downloaded Path of Exile 2 last night, and oh my God, I'm already hooked. It is incredible. So, I just say this to sort of give you that sort of that look into my world where I'm coming from with all this stuff. The Diablo 2 is sort of what spawned all of this for me, my interest in this. And I found Iron Helm. I went online looking for games like that, and I came across some Reddit posts about Iron Helm. I was a little on the fence about it at first. There was some, like with anything, of course, there were some mixed opinions. There were some people that were absolutely gung-ho about Iron Helm. there's some other people that didn't have very nice things to say about Iron Helm. And that's going to be with literally anything. You can't please everybody. There's nothing you're going to make or do ever in your life that everyone's going to like. I guess maybe unless you're Michael Jackson. No, I'm kidding. I'm sure some people maybe don't like Michael Jackson. I don't know. I'm joking. Anyway, you guys get the point I'm making. So that's kind of what started all this for me, man. I eventually, I watched a couple playthroughs after I found out about it, and I sat on the fence for about a week or two. And then I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get it. I'm just going to get it. I'm not going to know if I'm going to really like it unless I just get it. And get it, I did. Not only did I get the base game of Iron Helm, I bought all of it. I bought every expansion for the game, all of the booster pack expansions. I bought the Iron Chest expansion. I bought both of the playmats for the game. I got all of it, guys. I was like, if I'm going to get it, I'm getting all of it. Because I knew that if I bought the base game and I loved it, I wouldn't be able to wait to get the other stuff. So I literally just got all of it. And I had a high suspicion after watching the playthroughs that I was going to absolutely love the game. And man, I couldn't have been any more right. Iron Helm is absolutely incredible. So it holds a really special place in my game night heart, man, because this is what started me on this journey. So huge shout out to Jason Glover of Grey Gnome Games. Whether he realizes it or not, none of this would exist. You wouldn't be watching this video if it wasn't for him creating Iron Helm. So there it is, guys. We're going to go over the pros here. If that wasn't already enough of a shining, recommendation for the game, or, spotlight for the game there. So the pros, as far as the game mechanics go, the combat system, guys. Let's talk about the combat system. I love the combat system in this game. I like how almost sort of like in Tin Helm and Tin Realm, which of course this is Iron Helm, right? It's sort of like the big brother to Tin Helm. I like that there's the energy system where you can spend up to 3 energy, and for each energy that you spend, you get to roll a die. You get to roll a 6-sided die. So it gives you that player decision, this dude's only got a little bit. He's got, 2 health, 3 health, and he's got 3 health. I'll take the 50-50. You know what I mean? I'll probably be able to kill him. So yeah, or maybe it's not a 50-50. You get what I'm saying. It gives you that autonomy to decide how the combat's going to go, even though there is luck involved with the dice. So I like the energy system there. I think that's really, really neat. And then there's a bunch of different enemies that have their own little unique abilities and stuff, which, much like in Tin Helm and Tin Realm, it makes the combat feel really unique. So very, very solid combat mechanics there. And then as far as the push your luck mechanic goes, dude, this, I'm gonna take it back to earlier when I was talking about Desolate, and I mentioned that I felt like it was a little simple in comparison to some of the other games on the list. This is one of them, man. The push your luck mechanic in Iron Helm is fantastic. It's like taking the push your luck mechanic from Desolate and bumping it up to the next level. It really, really fleshes it out more. When you push your luck, your decision is more impactful, because if you push into, let's say you flip an ambush as the first card, or let's say you flip a skirmish as the first card, rather. You might not really want to get into a skirmish, because in Iron Helm, you typically want to avoid combat. You might not want to get into that skirmish, but if you push your luck into another skirmish, you're going to wish you would have just done the first one, because pushing your luck into the second one is way, way worse. Whereas like in Desolate, if you see an alien as the first card, if you were to push your luck into that exact same alien, it doesn't make it any different. It's literally the same difference. So there's not as much of a risk. Whereas in Iron Helm, there's a huge risk. There's much more of a risk. Or you can sometimes push into a card that's going to reward you. Like you might push into the altar, or, you might push into the Mushroom Grove and find some food, or you might push into the merchant and see what items he has for sale. So the push your luck mechanic, really, really solid in this game, and was really built upon from that sort of base push your luck mechanic from Desolate, and Jason nailed it here in Iron Helm. Really, really solid mechanic. And then again, your decisions matter. So, when to push your luck, much like in Tin Helm and Tin Realm, that's up to you, man. If you want to take the risk and push, go for it. Or if you want to go, you know what? I'm just going to stick with what I got here, cut my losses, and I don't want to push into anything gnarlier. That's totally up to you. So that's going to impact the outcome of the game. How much energy you spend in combat, that's totally up to you. Sometimes you're going to spend, this happened to me. I'll spend 3 energy against an enemy that's got like 12 health, because I'm like, I think I'm going to need all of these, and I'll roll 4 or 5 damage. It's going to happen sometimes, but that's still up to you how much you're going to spend, which I think is really, really cool. So it's got that luck because you're rolling dice, but it also gives you the decision on, how you can impact that to, to some degree. Also, there are skills in the game. So, your character is going to start out with a particular skill, and as you level up in the game, you're going to earn new skills. So every time you kill 3 enemies, you can flip those enemies over to learn a skill from your character's proficiency. So whether that be brawn or agility, you get to pick. Like, hey, do I want to learn a skill from that branch? Or do I want to learn a skill from outside of that branch? In which case, you would spend 5 of your enemies that you've killed by flipping them over. So the number of enemies that you've killed, it sort of acts kind of as like an experience point system. Like each of them counts, toward your experience. So if you flip 3, you get a skill from your own attribute or proficiency. And then if you flip 5, you can get any skill in the whole game. So you're gaining these new skills. And I think that that's a really, really solid mechanic, and it adds a lot to the game. And each time you play, you can go for different skill combos if you want. And it also kind of reminds me sort of again, sort of like Diablo, where you're going through like a skill tree. This one isn't as linear because you can pick different ones, but with those 3 different proficiencies, it definitely feels almost like 3 separate skill trees that you can go down, which is really, really neat. And of course, you can pick those skills in any order you want, which is cool. And then, of course, much like in Rogue Dungeon or like in Tin Helm and Tin Realm, when you use your items is totally up to you too. So that's another aspect where your player decision matters. Which items you want to use, if you want to pick up certain loot or maybe hang on to the loot that you already have. All of that is going to factor into your decision making and impact the outcome of the game. Now we're going to move on to the theme for Iron Helm. Once again, it's got that classic sort of D&D vibe, and man, I love it in this game. That was another thing that really drew me to Iron Helm is Jason's art in this game. It's got that old school vibe to it, dude. It's it's fantastic. Like, this is not a slight to the art at all. It's not like overdone and like hyper realistic and hyper detailed and touched up on a computer and looks CGI or anything like that. It looks human. It looks like somebody took out a sketch pad and sketched these things out and colored them, and it's great. Like just the shading lines and stuff. Like it looks very tactile, like it was just hand drawn. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I believe he uses a tablet to draw his artwork. So, it definitely still has that look to it, though, and he's got access to, different brushes and stuff like that within the whatever program he uses. So, but it still keeps that hand-drawn feel to it, which is fantastic. And again, it's got that sort of like D&D, classic D&D vibe to it. So it's sort of set, not in the D&D world, but a lot of it is that sort of vibe. So you're going to be running into goblins and orcs and wolves and all of that kind of stuff, things that you're very familiar with. You're going to find all of that stuff here in Iron Helm. And I personally love all that stuff. I grew up on that stuff, so I love that theme of the game, and all the weapons and everything you find are going to be in that vein too. And of course, we mentioned the art. The art is amazing, and the game is super immersive, much like in Rogue Dungeon or Tin Helm or some of these other games like, Hope of the Stranded. Super immersive. All of the artwork and everything is extremely cohesive, and it all works really well together, and you feel like you're moving through a dungeon. It's really cool. You feel like you're progressing through a dungeon and leveling up your character, earning new skills, gaining loot, and all of this stuff. And so it's definitely very, very immersive, and I can't speak highly enough on that point for the theme. So the overall theme, this is going to be right up most people's alley. It is a classic, old school fantasy vibe. And if you're into that, you're definitely going to love the theme of Iron Helm. And I think that's why the game is so successful, partly why the game is so successful. If this was reskinned as a sci-fi game, kind of like Dust Runner, unfortunately, it probably wouldn't do as well, but it does super, super well because it's that fantasy vibe. So definitely, if you're into that, definitely check that one out. Okay, guys, now we're going to talk about the replayability for Iron Helm and get into that bit of the pros list here. So, again, high replay value in Iron Helm, man, especially because not only does the base game already come with so much content, a bunch of different enemies, 3 different bosses that you can fight, all kinds of loot and trappings cards that you can get. It already comes with all of that, so it's already a pretty dense game, as you can see by the box. There are so many expansions for this game. It's amazing, dude. Like, it's incredible. You can get the Iron Chest expansion, which adds all kinds of new stuff to the game, even like a new mode to the game that I've never even played before, which I really need to do, where it's got like these big, like dungeon map cards that you can go through. And yeah, I don't know too much about that, so I don't want to comment too much about that. But yeah, there's like different modes to the game that I haven't even played yet. I've had the game for a year, and I've had that's a testament to how replayable this game is. I've been playing this game for a year, and I haven't even touched one of the other modes because I'm still like scratching the surface of the main mode in the game. No, I mean, I've more than scratched the surface. I've delved pretty deep into it, but still, you get the point that I'm making, I'm sure. So insane replay value, not only from the core game itself, but from all of the expansions. There's like I don't know what, 9 or 10 or something different little booster pack expansions that are like separate dungeon adventures that come with its own unique boss and unique enemies and unique loot that you can only find when you go on that adventure. So that makes that particular run feel so special and unique. It's so cool, man. So much replay value with all of the different expansions added to the game. Maybe more so than any other game on the list. Yeah, I think more so than any other game on the list. Iron Helm, for me personally, has like the highest replay value because of all those expansions that get added to the game. And yeah, there's a good amount of loot. There's a ton of loot. As mentioned, when you add a particular expansion to the game, you're going to find unique loot that you'll only find in that adventure for that dungeon. So there's a ton of different loot. There's a ton of different trappings cards that you can start with. Loads of different characters, dude. The base game comes with 4 characters, but as you buy the expansions, they each add characters to the game. And I think there's like over a dozen characters or something now. It's crazy. And not only that, Jason Glover came out with the Gnome Pack, like I mentioned earlier in the video, and Iron Helm got this awesome new character creation system. Dude, it is so freaking cool. You get a class card, then you get like a race card, and then you also get a star sign card. And all 3 of those cards combined give you this unbelievably unique character that has different abilities, different stats, different starting equipment. It's insane, dude. And I can't remember the exact number. I'm pretty sure Jason put out like a number of the different combinations, and I'm pretty sure it was like in the hundreds or something of like different character combinations that there are in the game. It's absolutely insane. I'll probably never get to experience everything that Iron Helm has to offer. That's how big it is. It's unbelievable. I can't overstate that enough. So it's massively replayable in regards to that. All of the different skills that you can get. Again, all the trappings, the loot, everything. There's mercenaries that you can hire from the expansion. There's environment cards that get added from some of the expansions. These overpowered like artifact loot cards that you can get that one of the expansions adds, all the different bosses that get added to the game. So there's not just the 3 base bosses from the core game, but all the other ones that get added from the other expansions that gives you several different bosses that you can fight. Also, there's an alternate dungeon deck for the game called the Howling Abyss. So if you get tired of going through the base, I believe it's an 18 card or 16 card dungeon deck that comes with the game, you can use the Howling Abyss dungeon deck and have like a different experience going through the game. Or if you want to, you can go out, you could shuffle them together. You know, if you use card sleeves that have like a solid color back to them, you can mix them all together and create one big, dungeon with all of them mixed together. It's really up to you, however you want to do it. So replay value through the roof, through the stratosphere, onto another planet, and through that planet's stratosphere, dude. Through the other side of the freaking universe, guys. Like, Iron Helm is unbelievably highly replayable. So I'll leave that at that, man. It's incredible. As far as the components and the quality goes, once again, you're getting this game from the Game Crafter. Super high quality. All the cards and components are professional high quality. Tons of cards, an absolute load of cards. Even with the base game, it comes with a boatload of cards. It's got a fair amount of components because you're using like these little tokens to keep track of your health and your energy levels and food and all that kind of stuff. So it comes with a fair amount of tokens. It comes with some dice. It comes with some little like pawn meeples to keep track of where you are in the dungeon or what your morality is on the morality tracker. So it's not overly component heavy, but it does have a fair amount of little components that come with it. Not quite as much as Rogue Dungeon though. And then again, like I mentioned on the art, I'll just come back to that real quick. It's got that amazing old school art, and that is just done at such a high quality. So all of that really adds to the quality and the value of the game in that department. And then moving on to the last category for Iron Helm is the fun factor. Guys, this game feels big, man. It feels big. It comes in a fairly medium-ish size, smallish sized box here, but the game feels big. Because of all the things I've already mentioned, man. All the enemies that you can fight. It feels like you're going through this big immersive dungeon and picking up loot, and it feels like you're playing a game. It feels like you're playing an action role-playing game, like a computer game or a video game. So yeah, it feels very, very big. It's very tense. The battles are tense. They come down to the wire sometimes. The push your luck mechanic, of course, adds to that tension. All of it adds to the immersion in the game. It's extremely immersive. It's got very balanced luck versus strategy because, of course, you're drawing cards, you're rolling dice, but you're able to push your luck. So, it gives you some player choice on kind of mitigating your luck a little bit as far as that goes. How much energy you want to spend to roll your dice mitigates a little bit of that dice luck and all that kind of stuff. The different gear that you get will mitigate some of that as well. So yeah, very, very balanced as far as luck versus strategy, especially with the expansions. I will say the core game of Iron Helm, if you just get just the base game of Iron Helm, from what I remember from my personal experience, it may have been a lack of experience with this game. The game was very difficult. Very, very difficult. There's definitely times where, and this could maybe be seen as a con, there's definitely times where you'll run into an enemy and it doesn't matter what you do. You're going to roll really bad rolls on the dice and get unlucky and just die. So that's going to happen. But again, that can happen in any game. It can happen in Rogue Dungeon. It can happen in Dust Runner. It can happen in any game. You know what I mean? It can happen in Lost Rubies. All of these games that can play a factor. But I do remember, particularly in Iron Helm with just the base game, it was pretty unforgiving as far as the luck goes. It can be a little skewed, maybe more toward the luck in that regard. But once you add all the other stuff in, I feel like it balances it out a lot. And then as far as the fun factor goes, gaining skills is extremely rewarding. Being able to pick a new skill, you really feel that sense of progression, like your character is leveling up and getting stronger. And that just feels great. Picking up that 6th Sense skill and being able to skip an ambush card once through the dungeon feels amazing. Picking up, that treasure hunter, I believe it's called treasure hunter, when you kill an enemy and you get an energy from it. I believe that's how it works. Or when you get a gold, rather, I think you gain an energy. So there's all kinds of different skills that you can get, and that really adds to the sense of progression. And so it makes, quote unquote, leveling up, if you want to call it that, it makes it feel very, very rewarding. So I have gone on and on about how amazing Iron Helm is, guys. Now we're going to talk about a couple of the cons with the game before we move into my number one pick. So some of the cons, as far as the game mechanics go, there's a lot to keep track of, especially with the expansions. And again, this is just a me thing. So there's kind of like a running gag that I've started on my channel where I say that I have a goldfish memory because I talk and talk and talk. I get really excited. I'm really animated when I'm playing these games and I'm really into it. And I'm just playing to have fun. I'm not like this try-hard gamer that's trying to like min-max the crap out of the game and like squeeze every ounce of efficiency out of the game. Like, I get a lot of comments and like, I appreciate them, guys. Like, I really do appreciate when people are like, oh, at this point in the video, you really could have done this. Or at this point you could have done, you could have done this. And it's like, I know, guys, I appreciate you pointing it out. I catch most of that stuff when I'm watching the videos back while I'm editing because it's a totally different game, man. Like when you're in the moment and you're playing the game and you're trying to keep track of all of these different things, you've got a billion different things in your mind all at once. It's a lot harder to keep track of as opposed to when I'm sitting back and watching the video. I will instantly notice when I make a mistake like you guys do. And I'm like, oh crap, I messed that up right there. Like I see it, guys. It's just when you're in the moment, I promise it would be the same for you too. When you're in the moment, it's hard to keep track of everything. And for me personally, I get that more so with any game in Iron Helm, I think, because there's a lot to keep track of, especially when you start introducing the expansions, like the mercenary, trying to keep track of, when your mercenary's unique ability triggers, when this very particular thing happens, or, maybe an ability on a weapon that I have, or, I might have a skill that I could have used to get myself out of a scenario, but at the moment, my mind wasn't there at all. I was just focused elsewhere and I missed it. So while that can be seen as a con, on the other side, if you look at it from a different perspective, I could actually say it being a pro. The fact that there is so much to keep track of, it gives the game sort of like a higher skill ceiling, honestly, because the better you are at like sort of multitasking and keeping track of all these various things, which I know most of you guys, or at least some of you, I'm sure, are probably better at it than I am. That would be really rewarding. So you can get better at that. You know what I mean? That's definitely something that you can get better at and become more aware of and go, maybe if I slow down a little bit and pay a little bit more attention, I might be able to catch on to this a little bit more. But again, I mean, that's how forgetting thing goes, right? If you could remember not to forget, the word forget wouldn't exist. You'd never forget anything. So, but anyway, so that's maybe a little bit of a con just for me. Like I notice when I play Iron Helm, I make a lot of mistakes and I'll forget things here and there, but it's cool. I'm human. I'm not perfect. It's going to happen. And I still enjoy it anyway and have an absolute blast playing the game, win or lose, whether I make mistakes or not. And then as far as the components and the quality goes, this is a minor gripe for me. You use tokens to track your stats. So I really like how in some of the other games, like in Mini Moons, Dust Runner, Tin Realm, you use little tracking cubes to track your stats on like a game mat or on tracker cards. Whereas in Iron Helm, you have individual square shaped like chits, basically little like tiles that you stack on top of one another to track different things, or some of them are circular, like for the poison and for your health. It's like these little circular chit pieces that have hearts and like little green poison drops on them, and you stack them up. So it's hard to tell how much health and stuff you have at a glance because you're just looking at like a stack of these little tokens rather than it being set on a number. So that's just a minor gripe. The cool thing though is that Jason actually released in the Gnome Pack, he released some tracker cards for Iron Helm. So that basically eliminates that problem. If you don't want to use those little tokens, you can use those. And oddly enough, even though I'm complaining about this, or not complaining, but putting it as a con, I actually don't use those cards. I still just use the little like tokens. Because I don't know. There's something about them. Like that's Iron Helm to me. Like that's the OG Iron Helm, and that's the way I want to play it. So that's the way I do it. And having that goldfish memory, I have to check how much health and stuff I have pretty frequently because I forget. But again, minor con, and it's already been solved. Jason already solved it, so this is a me thing. It's my own fault that I keep doing that to myself, but I enjoy it. I do enjoy it. So if that's something that you might not like, there is an alternative. You can get the Gnome Pack and get those little tracker cards for Iron Helm. Moving on to another con for the game is that I've already touched on a little bit is the luck factor. This is definitely one of those games where like I mentioned earlier, it just doesn't matter what you do, even though you do have a lot of player choice. And again, this is all of these games. This could also happen in Rogue Dungeon. I talked up Rogue Dungeon, and I probably should have mentioned this in that one too, but I'll mention it now. As for any of these games, sometimes luck is just not on your side, and no matter what you do, you just lose the game. And that's happened, a lot to me in Iron Helm because I've probably played this game more than any other game that I own. Definitely played this game more than any other game that I own. So I've had several runs where I'm spending energy and I'm rolling dice, but I'm just rolling crap. And then the enemy rolls really high, rolls to hit me and you just die and there's nothing you can do. And that's just the way that it is, man. That's just part of the game. If you don't like it, don't play. You know what I mean? So that's kind of how that goes. But there is a big luck factor in it. I think more so, like I mentioned earlier, in the base game than in the actual, with the expansions and stuff added. Just because it adds more stuff to it and you have a little bit more decisions to make that you can kind of impact things with, like with your mercenary ability, or if you do the character creation with your star sign, gives you some different stuff, gives you some different trappings to start with and stuff like that. So that definitely makes it a little different. Also, if you play the Howling Abyss dungeon deck rather than the OG dungeon deck, I think that goes a long way in making the game easier. That deck overall, from my experience, it makes the game a lot easier. So if you want a more chill, casual experience and you don't want to get absolutely trounced by bad luck, I would suggest maybe running the Howling Abyss deck. But if you want to play it old school and you want to feel like you're playing Diablo 2 and you're a freaking masochist like me, but just play old school Iron Helm. That'll definitely scratch that itch for you. And the last thing I want to mention for the cons pertains to loot. I feel like loot drops entirely too much in this game, and at a point, usually early on even, the loot just doesn't matter anymore. So this is especially true with certain characters. I believe it's Oslo. So if you play as Oslo, you get to start with the trapping called the Battle Axe, and it is by far without a doubt, hands down, the best weapon in the game, which means you start with the best weapon in the game. So every weapon that drops in the dungeon from that point forward, from the beginning of the game to the end, you don't give two craps about it. You literally don't care about it because nothing is as good as the battle axe. When you roll ones with the battle axe, it turns them into sixes. It's insane. So you don't need anything else. And even if you don't play Oslo and you don't start with the battle axe, if you pick up, say the Cinder Blade early on, like you fight an enemy and you pick up the Cinder Blade, might even be the first enemy. You're just like, okay, cool, I'm set. Any weapon I get from now on, I don't care about at all. What's oh, cool, he dropped a dagger. I don't care. Oh, cool, he dropped a short bow. I don't care. Like, you just don't care about it. And that, again, I'm going to use Diablo as sort of an analogy here. That feels more like Diablo 3 to me, which I played a lot of, but no. I played enough of that game that I kind of have my own opinion about it. I don't like Diablo 3. I think it's just not nearly as good as Diablo 2. Whereas in Diablo 2, when you get loot, it feels impactful. You hang on to it for a while, and then when you upgrade, when you get new loot, it's typically an upgrade to what you have, and it feels good to get new loot. So that's a little bit of a gripe that I have in Iron Helm. It doesn't just go for the weapons; it also goes for the armor. Once you get that scale mail, you don't care about anything else. You're blocking 2 damage or whatever it is, every time on counter strikes and initial attacks. So you don't really need anything else. And so that's what I find is maybe a shortcoming of the game. I'm not really sure, if it's a massive con. It's really not a massive con because I still love the game, but that is something that I've found several times during this year playing Iron Helm, that I'd get certain items and I'm like, oh man, I'm bummed because it's fun to get loot, and it's kind of, I don't know. It feels a little bit bad that once you get like the best in slot item that you're like, well, I'm still having fun. I'm going to keep killing enemies, but it kind of sucks knowing that any loot I pick up from now on, I'm just immediately going to discard, or hang on to just to sell to the merchant. And for what, really? Because you don't really need to buy anything from them because you've already got the best loot. So it makes the merchant kind of obsolete. So again, I think that's maybe like the number one flaw, if you can even call it that, in the game. It's really not that big of a deal. It still feels great. I've gone on and on and on about Iron Helm now at length about how much I love this game. So those are just a few things that I could find to sort of nitpick and be objective about just from my own personal experience playing the game. So there's that, guys. Iron Helm, just get it. Don't even think about it. Go down to the description right now, turn your brain off, and go to gamecrafter.com, buy Iron Helm and all the expansions and the game mats, and you can thank me later. You can come back and leave a comment on this video and thank me. So there it is, guys. Iron Helm by Jason Glover. The game that started all of this, the game that spawned the birth of this Game Night YouTube channel. Thank you, Jason Glover. Huge shout out to you, bro, for making this amazing game and sending me down this journey down this rabbit hole of solo player tabletop games with Iron Helm. That being said, guys, it's finally here. This is a long video. We're moving on to the number one game that I have played in 2024. Let's get to it. And now for the number one game that I have played in 2024, the number one solo tabletop game for the old game night here. Some of you guys probably already know what it is, and you're thinking, did he really put this as number one? Oh, you bet your butt I put it as number one, guys. My number one favorite game that I played this year is Crypt Crawler, guys. This is, hey, throw all the shade you want, dude. I'm a generally humble person, but guys, I am just being honest with you. I know I made this game, so, it might seem like it's a little biased, and, it probably is. I am just being honest with you. Crypt Crawler is my absolute favorite game I have ever played. My favorite solo tabletop game I've ever played, Mint 10 or otherwise. As much as I love Iron Helm, as much as I love Rogue Dungeon and Dust Runner and Mini Moons and Gamma Guild and all the rest, Crypt Crawler is the one for me, guys. And it's no surprise, right? I made it. So it's got all of the things that I love about a game crammed into this one game. It's like the best of everything for me personally that I subjectively like the most in one game, and it's got all of it. So it's my absolute favorite game that I've played this year, and probably will be, into the foreseeable future until I come out with my next game, which maybe I'll hint at later on. Some of you guys already know about it, but we're not going to talk about that now. We'll create some mystery around that. So Crypt Crawler, guys, let's hop into the pros, man. Let's hop into the pros. The game mechanics category here. it's got the push your luck mechanic, guys. Obviously, full disclosure, a lot of the stuff in this game, it's me taking inspiration and being inspired by other games that I've played, much like any art form. All the music you hear today, it's all just a take on something that inspired, that musician or artist or band to create something in maybe a similar vein, but with their own spin on it. And that's what a lot of these games are. A lot of these games borrow mechanics and put their own twist on it to kind of make it their own. And the push your luck mechanic is something that I definitely took inspiration from, not only from Iron Helm, but also from Dust Runner and the Tin Helm games as well. So the push your luck mechanic, I think is absolutely amazing in this game. And I really fine-tuned it and honed it down to where, when you push your luck in this game, there's multiple outcomes that you can push your luck into. You're not pushing your luck into one singular outcome, say like in Iron Helm. It's not like that. There's a ton of different possibilities, way more possible, like 3 or 4 times the amount of possibilities of things that you can push your luck into Crypt Crawler. So it really makes that push your luck mechanic even more impactful, even more dynamic, even more diverse and immersive. So I absolutely love how I implemented that into Crypt Crawler. I will never get tired of it. It's unbelievably fun, and it's such a core driving mechanic of the game that is very, very, very fun. Also, the combat in the game. The combat in the game is super, super fun to me. I feel like I created a very unique combat system in this game that I personally haven't seen in another game. It might exist. I haven't seen it. I think it's cool that not only the enemies, but also your weapon cards have these 3 different damage values that they can do, and they're linked basically to a percentage or a likelihood. So if you roll a 1, 2, or a 3, which is going to be 50% of the time on a 6-sided die, you'll deal the least amount of damage. Then if you roll a 4 or a 5, you'll deal the next amount of damage. Then if you roll which will be, 33% of the time. Then if you roll a 6, which is, roughly 16% of the time, you're going to deal that third amount of damage, which is going to be highest. So it really plays into that sort of variance where that'll even out over time. But, most of the time you're dealing lower damage, but then you'll get those lucky sort of like critical hits. You know what I mean? When you roll a 6 to deal your maximum damage with your weapon, and same thing for the enemies. So it kind of balances that out too. Most of the time the enemies are going to be hitting you for, their lower end damage half the time. And then every now and then they'll just nail you with a big 6 critical hit, you know what I mean, and deal their maximum damage. So I think that's a really cool part of the combat system. Also, another thing that I am super proud of with the combat system is the resolution cards, which we're going to touch on. There are these multi-purpose resolution cards, which again, I was sort of inspired by Dust Runner. I was like, oh, that's cool. You can take one card and put all kinds of different things on it to make it useful for multiple different scenarios. And one of the things that you can use those cards for in the dungeon deck is modifiers. So they turn into modifier cards for the enemy. So depending on what level of the dungeon you're in, that's how many modifier cards the enemy is going to get. So if you're on level 1 and you're fighting a rat, for instance, you'll take the top card of the dungeon deck, flip it over to its resolution side, and along the bottom, it'll have, the stats. It'll have the health, the toughness, the strength, and the speed modifiers, and you slide that underneath the bottom of the rat card, and you add those stats to those same stats at the bottom of the rat card. So a rat on level 1 with 1 modifier card is going to be much easier to handle than if you fight a rat on level 5 that's going to get 5 modifier cards. So it also makes it too that every time you run into an enemy, you're getting random modifier cards. So it makes each one feel different and unique, and it makes the combat feel dynamic. So while the enemies may lack special abilities, which is sort of more so symbolized in their damage values, like when you fight a spider, rather than putting text on the card that says when the spider hits you, it does poison damage. It's just symbolized by by a little green poison drop in its little attack box with the number on top to show how much poison it does. Or if they can burn you with fire damage, rather than writing all that on the card, it's got like a little fire symbol. So they do have abilities, but they're sort of symbolized by these icons. To build off of that, since they don't have, these wildly crazy unique abilities, the fact that they have modifier cards that make them feel different I think is really, really cool and makes each fight different. Most of the time you're going to run into, like, say, a zombie, and they're typically slow. They got 2 speed. They're really slow. Sometimes you'll run into one that gets a bunch of speed. Like in a playthrough I did recently, I ran into a zombie that got 3 extra speed, and he was a 5-speed zombie. And when I first pulled it, I was like, okay, it's going to be a zombie. I should be good. And then it got those modifiers, and he got to attack me first. And he was able to hit me for 2. He rolled a 6 and was able to hit me for 2 fear and send me over my fear threshold. And I lost the game because of it. So it really makes them really unique. It was like a 28 days later zombie. He just came rushing at me. So I love that. It makes all the fights feel unique and feel dynamic and different. Won't harp on too much more about that, but yeah. Also with the combat, I love that I added this mechanic with stamina. So, you're rolling dice, so there's going to be luck involved, but you have the ability to mitigate that luck to some extent by spending up to 3 stamina every time you successfully hit an enemy. So if you hit an enemy and you roll and you didn't roll high enough to kill them, maybe they've got 2 or 3 hit points left, you can spend up to 3 stamina points and deal 1 extra damage per stamina that you spent to sort of symbolize like you putting more force into that swing when you hit them. And so you can go, oh, he's got 2 health left after this roll. Well, I'm going to increase the strength of this hit by spending 2 of my stamina, bump it up to 2, and just take this guy out right now. Now, that's cool because it gives the player the decision to do that. But it also is a finite resource, that stamina. So you really have to decide, do I want to use the stamina to kill this skeleton on level 1? Or do I want to hang on to it when I might need it more, in a fight with a stronger enemy in a later level of the dungeon? So again, that gives you player decision. There's all kinds of decision making that goes into that combat mechanic. Also, you start the game with 3 lucky coins. So if you roll your to hit dice, your black dice, and you roll lower than the enemy's armor class, but you really feel like, man, I really got to hit this guy. Like if you're fighting a demon or something, you're like, dude, this demon's going to kill me. If I miss this attack, I've got to kill him. I rolled a 3, but his armor class is 4. I need to roll equal to or higher. Then you can spend a lucky coin and then bump your to hit roll up by 1 per lucky coin that you spend. And so that helps mitigate that luck. And of course, you start the game with 3 coins, and that's all you get. You only get 3 coins for the whole game. So it's a finite resource that you as a player have to decide when is the best time to use, much like your stamina. And that adds to the skill in the game, that adds to the player decision-making in the game, which brings me on to my next point. Your decisions matter a lot in Cryptcrawler. I had a comment recently on Board Game Geek saying that they had watched some of the playthroughs and they were a little concerned if your decision-making mattered in the game, and they were worried that it just came to, you just roll dice and you just see what happens. That could not be further from the truth, man. Especially with Cryptcrawler, I would say even more so with Cryptcrawler than in Iron Helm or Tin Helm. And by no means throwing shade at those games at all whatsoever. I'm just being objectively honest here. I feel like your decision-making in Cryptcrawler matters more so than in those games because you have more factors that you have control over, especially, with the stamina, when you want to spend your stamina, when you want to spend your lucky coins, when to push your luck, and factoring all of that in, what rooms to enter. It's like if you're low on oil, your lantern's about to burn out, and you have the decision to go into a green circle room or a yellow triangle room. If you know the game well enough and you've played enough, you'll know that you've got a higher chance to find oil if you go into a yellow triangle room. So that's up to you to do that. It's up to the player to make those decisions, and you can't blame it on the game if you lose because you made the wrong decision. Sometimes you can because you're going to get unlucky, but that definitely factors into the decision making. Also, when to use your skills. So your characters in the game have 3 unique skills depending on what class you pick, and some of them are activated skills that you get to decide when you want to use them. And most of them are triggered by spending a certain number of stamina in order to use them. That's totally up to the player's discretion when or when not to use those skills. Of course, the lucky coins, when to spend your stamina, when to use your items. Do you want to drink your potion now, or do you want to wait till later to maximize the efficiency of it? When to spend your gold in shops, what items you want to buy in the shops, what armor pieces you want to apply your damage to, etc. I mean, there's just so many different aspects of Cryptcrawler that the player has the autonomy and decision-making ability to decide what they want to do in any moment of the game, and it helps to mitigate that luck in the game, which makes the luck to skill balance, I think, extremely balanced in Crypt Crawler. And of course, like in any of the other games like Iron Helm and Rogue Dungeon and the rest, you are going to have games where sometimes you go into a room and you get some really bad rolls and the enemy gets some great rolls and you just die. I talked to my buddy Brian yesterday. He texted me. He's been playing the crap out of Crypt Crawler. And he was like, bro, I just did a run. I went into the first room of level 1 of the dungeon. I pushed my luck into a demon and he massacred me. So like that is going to happen sometimes. By the way, Brian, dude, I'm pretty sure you got the record, bro. I'm pretty sure like you've got the record for like shortest game of Crypt Crawler ever played right there. So that's pretty cool. Rest in peace to the character that went through that dungeon, man. But anyway, so you know that you are going to run into situations like that sometimes. It's going to happen. It's got dice. It's got cards. There's luck in the game. It's just going to happen sometimes, but you can mitigate a lot of that. So, yeah, I think that makes your decision-making very important in Crypt Crawler. Also, I'll mention the multi-purpose resolution cards, which I've already mentioned. I was, highly inspired by the multi-purpose resolution cards from Dust Runner. And I was like, man, that's brilliant. I want to do something like that. So the dungeon deck in the game has a map on one side of the card, which you use as a map card to go through the level, depending on what level you're on. And then when you flip it to the other side, it's got all kinds of information on there. It's got the different symbols, the green circle, yellow triangle, red diamond, and purple star symbols to depict what outcome is in that room. And of course, if you push your luck, you do the outcome that's in red text. So it's got, the outcomes for the rooms. At the top of the card, it might have a blood drop symbol showing that there's a blood altar in there that you can use in order to basically, the way I imagine is like you cut your hand over this blood altar and sacrifice some of your blood into this altar to make the boss at the end of the game easier to deal with. Again, that's pretty dark. It gives me Diablo 2 vibes. Wanted the game to be, dark, grungy, kind of grungy and creepy like that. Or, it might have a gold coin at the top of the card, which means there's a shop in the room. Or it might have the soul fragment symbol at the top of the card, meaning that there's a soul shrine in the room where you can combine your fragments into a soul crystal. Then there's also events. So every card has its own unique event on it, whether it be traps like granite gargoyle statues in the corners of the room blasting searing hot flames from their mouths, or whether you run into a room where there's a foe in the shadows that ambushes you, or maybe you run into the campsite where you see you find a leather bag leaned up against a circular pile of stones where there was a little campfire, and you can rummage through the bag and maybe find some food or gold. So there's all these different little events that can take place as well. And then at the bottom of the cards, on the resolution cards, you've got the different stats that I mentioned earlier that will act as modifiers to modify the enemy's stats. So they're multi-purpose. They do all kinds of different things. And I feel like that adds a lot of content to the game, all jammed into one tiny little space. And it's not overwhelming. I feel like it's a great use of the space. And I'm able to make the game feel very big and immersive and expansive by putting all of that onto, basically one card. So that adds a ton to the game with those multi-purpose resolution cards. And then also a great thing that I love about the game mechanics is the fear mechanic in the game. So you have a lantern, and when you move through the dungeon, you move your little footstep tracker up on the footstep track meter, and that's to signify that as you're traversing the dungeon, the oil in your lantern is slowly burning as you move through the dungeon. So once you take enough steps, once you've taken 10 steps essentially and entered 10 rooms, your lantern is going to burn out, and you're going to be in total darkness, and your character is going to be affected by that psychologically. So you're going to start accumulating fear. So from that point forward, every time you take a step and you move into a new room in the dungeon, rather than moving your footstep tracker up by 1, you move your fear tracker up by 1. And each race card that you use to create your character with the race and class card, each race card has its own fear threshold. So each character has its own, threshold of fear that they can withstand before they go insane. And of course, if you reach that fear threshold or exceed it, you lose the game. So I absolutely love that mechanic. I haven't seen it used like that in any other game before, so I'm pretty proud of that one. And it adds a lot of tension. Not only are you trying to, collect fragments to get the soul crystals and get to the boss so you can get the heck out of the dungeon and win the game, not only are you trying to not die from your health going to zero and not die from poison, you're also trying to make sure that your lantern stays lit. So there's a lot of tension in the game coming from multiple angles, and that fear and lantern mechanic definitely adds to that. And there's a lot of relief when you find oil and you're able to top off your lantern and know that you're good to go for a little bit longer so that you could stay in the light. Also, building off of that idea is a mechanic where there are certain enemies that you'll only encounter in the dark. You'll only encounter certain enemies when your lantern burns out. And as of right now in the core base game of Crypt Crawler, that means ghosts and banshees. You'll only encounter those when you're in the dark, and they will increase your fear. Their attacks can add fear to you, making them extremely, extremely dangerous enemies that you do not want to run into at all in the dark. They can end your run pretty quickly, especially if you've already accumulated a little bit of fear from other means in the game, certain events, certain enemies, or from your lantern being burned out for too long and you've been roaming in the dark for a while. So I think that's really cool that you only encounter certain enemies in the dark. Very, very cool mechanic there. Now we're going to move on to the theme of the game. So once again, as this has been the theme of the past few games, and I guess if you can't tell, this is my favorite type of game, my favorite theme. I went for the classic fantasy D&D type of vibe for Crypt Crawler. Very intentional. I went for old school art. Now I'll be the first to admit I'm not an artist. I pretty much never draw. It was kind of born out of necessity. I had to create this game. I was too passionate about creating this game, and I felt what was a very solid game mechanically, and was having a blast playing with the prototype cards. So I said, well, you know what? I got to get art for these cards, and it's probably going to cost me an arm and a leg if I hired somebody to do it. So you know what? I'm going to do it myself. And I figured it would be really rewarding to create every single aspect of the game myself. And it is. It is unbelievably rewarding, but maybe the most rewarding thing I've ever created in my entire life, honestly. And I'm a musician, so I make music, and I'm very passionate about that too. But there's just something about Crypt Crawler, man. It doesn't take me, 10, 11 months to write a song, but it took me 10 or 11 months to create Crypt Crawler. So when I finally got to hold this game in my hands and see all the time and effort and hard work that I put into it, including drawing everything, a very unique feeling that I've never experienced before, and don't know if I'll ever experience again, to be quite honest with you, unless I make another game, which I will. But it probably won't be quite like the first time, but who knows? Anyways, I'm going off on a tangent. The vibe of the art, I went for that old school vibe, and it's perfect for me because, like I said, I'm not an artist. So, some of the stuff might look a little derpy. You might see the skeleton and be like, looks a little derpy, or the troll looks kind of derpy. But I like it. I think it adds to the charm of the game, and the fact that everything is cohesive, and it's got that old school vibe. It looks like somebody sat down with a pencil and a piece of paper and drew it, because that's literally exactly what I did. None of this was drawn digitally, other than the coloring. I drew everything by hand with pencil on a piece of blank printer paper for every single thing you see in the game. All the icons, all of the enemies, everything you see in the game, I drew by hand and put into GIMP, which is a photo editing software, and added color and everything like that to it, digitally, but everything else I drew by hand. So I love it. I love the way it came out. I think it adds perfectly to the vibe. It's whimsical, super colorful. Even though the setting is sort of dark and grungy and gritty, it's very, very colorful as well. So, I think the art is amazing, and I couldn't be happier with the way it came out. And I'm a freaking perfectionist, guys. I'm very critical of the things that I do, and I want it to, and I know a lot of us are, we can be our own worst critic, but, there's sometimes here and there, and I'm like, oh, maybe I could have drawn that better. I'm like, no, you know what? It's good. It's perfect just the way it is. I love the way it came out. It's very whimsical, very cool, very old school. Also, last point I want to make for the theme, I think the game is incredibly immersive. There is just so much immersion in the game. I feel like I'm much like in Iron Helmet and Rogue Dungeon. I feel like I'm going through a dungeon. You're moving your little meeple on these map cards, so it looks like you're actually in the level of the dungeon, moving into the rooms. All the art, again, ties everything together, so it all feels very cohesive. It feels like you're running into these enemies, running into these events. When an event pops up, like one I mentioned earlier with the stone gargoyle statues, it just creates imagery in my mind that I'm in this, this room with stone brick walls, and there's these granite gargoyle statues in the room, and it's dimly lit from my lantern, and it creates a vibe. Super immersive, super immersive theme and vibes in the game for sure. Now we're going to move on to the replayability category. High replay value, guys. There is so much replay value in Cryptcrawler for so many reasons that I've already mentioned, that I'll kind of just glaze over these again and cover over these. We got loot variety. There's a fair amount of loot variety. There's also a little bit of loot scarcity, not maybe to the extent that it is in Tin Helm and Tin Realm, but it's also not like loot is dropping out of the sky like candy, sort of like it is in Iron Helm a little bit. It's more of a middle ground. And yeah, there's a fair amount of loot variety because there's common loot, there's uncommon loot, and there's rare loot. So obviously those rare loot you're going to see much less often. So when you get one, it's very impactful, feels very special. Even with the uncommon loot, maybe, a little bit less than the rare loot, you'll see those a little bit more often, but it feels very impactful. And of course, with the commons, you'll see those most frequently. So it really adds value to each of the pieces of loot, them having a rarity and how often you're able to get those to drop off of enemies, which is really, really cool. Also, there's potions in the game, and it's not just a health potion or just a mana potion. I have 6 unique potions in the game that all do different things. They're all unique. They all feel special, and they all have their own, times that you might want to use them in their most opportune times. So that adds a lot to the replayability. Also, the enemy variety. There are 12 different enemies in the game. Like I mentioned earlier, some of them, like the Ghost and the Banshee, are only going to fight when you're in the dark. And when you do fight enemies, it feels different each time, because they have different damage types that they do, whether it's poison or fear or burn or regular physical damage. They have different, stats. All of them have different stats. Maybe some of them have a lot of health, but not much toughness, maybe low strength, so-and-so. Maybe some of them are really fast while others are really slow. And then, of course, once you start adding those modifier cards into the mix, depending on what level of the dungeon you're on, it creates a very dynamic experience and makes all of the enemies feel very, very different. So even one single enemy, like I mentioned earlier with the zombie, a zombie that you fight in one room might feel and play completely different than a zombie that you fight in the next room or even the room after that. So a lot of replay value as far as the variability of the enemies go and variety of the enemies goes. And of course the modifier cards add so much to that. The multi-purpose resolution cards add a ton to the replay value with all the different events, the dozens and dozens of different outcomes that you can run into, depending on what color and shape the symbol is in the room that you're in. And then of course you can push your luck out of those. Tons of content going on there. There's a bunch of map cards because there's 16 dungeon cards that have the maps on one side and then the resolution side of the cards on the other. So you're going through 5 levels of the dungeon. If you go through all 5, of course, you can reach the boss before level 5. Most of the time, you probably won't even get to level 5. But even if you do, you're only seeing 5 of those map cards. So every time you play the game, chances are the levels you go through are going to be different. You might get one, here or there that's the same as the last playthrough, but there's a high chance that you might not even run into a single map card that you played in the game before, because there's 16 different ones. So that's going to add to the replay value also, and just how you move about those map cards, what situation you're in at the time, which room is more advantageous for you to move into. Should you move into that green room and maybe fight something a little bit easier, or maybe just try to pick up a gold or a piece of food or something? Or are you really, struggling to get those last couple of fragments and you're like, you know what, I'm going to move over here into this red room where I have a higher chance of fighting a more difficult enemy and I could pick up, some more fragments. So there's a lot of decision making that goes on into that as well. There's a lot of characters. There's a combination of 16 characters in the game. So I've got all the race cards are on each side. So there's 2 cards that have a race on each side and then 2 cards that have a class on each side. So not taking a dig at all at Tin Helm, but I feel like it's a little bit improved from Tin Helm, whereas in Tin Helm, and it might have been intentional, there's certain combinations that you're just locked out of because, say you've got an elf on one side of the card and a ranger on the other, for instance, you can never be an elf ranger because it's on each side of the card. Whereas in Cryptcrawler, you could be any combination of anything you want. And there's 16 different playable characters here in the base game. They all have their own stats. Each class has 3 unique skills that you unlock as you gain experience and level up in the game. So that adds a ton of replay value to the game as well, combining those different things. They start with different starting gear. So lots of variation and replayability there. The bosses, there are 4 different bosses that you run into depending on which 3 color of soul crystals you acquire in the game. And they all have their own unique stats. their own unique abilities, their own unique damage output. They all feel very unique and different to fight, so that's going to add a lot to the replay value. And then there's all the different events that you can run into with different outcomes for each event. The shops that you can find that have different items on the shelves that you can get depending on what color room you're in, whether it's green circle, yellow triangle, or red diamond. So yeah, just tons and tons of different things I could go over for Crypt Crawler that adds to the replay value of the game. Obviously, that was all intentional. I wanted to make sure that this game was jam-packed full of content and feels like a massive dungeon crawl experience that's confined within this little mint tin, and I'm honestly blown away by it. And it's not just me, because I don't want to sound, like I'm bragging. I've had other people comment and tell me like, man, like I'm shocked at how much you were able to fit in this tin and how big and immersive and expansive of an experience you've created inside this tiny little mint tin. So mega replay value on this one. Once again, through the freaking stratosphere, out the other side of the universe, as far as I'm concerned with Crypt Crawler. I could play this game over and over again, and every playthrough feels different. Then we're going to move on to the components and the quality. Of course, comes from the Game Crafter. I had to get them to make the game, of course, and everything is super high quality from the cards down to the components and, of course, the tin itself. There's a bunch of little components with the game. You get a bunch of little dice to keep track of things, also to use to roll for your to hit and damage rolls. You get a bunch of little tracker cubes that you can use to track your different stats in the game. There's the little lucky coins. There's the soul crystals. And then there's all the cards. So it's not overwhelming. It's definitely not nearly as much components that you would get in, like, say, Rogue Dungeon, for instance. But it's a lot, and it was just enough that if you do not sleeve the game and you do some mint tin component Tetris, you can get everything to fit inside of the tin. Now, I do have my game sleeved, so that's why I've provided a little red component pouch that will come with the game. That's about the same size as the tin, so you can keep all your components in that pouch. You can even fit the tin in the pouch with it, which is kind of cool if you want to sleeve the game. But otherwise, if you do a little bit of Tetris, you can finagle it and get everything to fit inside of the tin. So yeah, very, very high quality stuff there. The art, once again, I'm really proud of the art. I love the old school vibe. It's all very colorful. And I feel like, for me, it's as high quality as it's going to get for me. I love the vibe of it. And of course the game comes in a mint tin, so it's extremely compact. You can toss it into your pocket if you want to, into your backpack, and you've got literally an entire dungeon crawling, ARPG Diablo 2-esque experience right there in your pocket. Yeah, it's amazing. I'm very proud of what I was able to accomplish as far as that goes. Now we're going to move on to the last bit here, which is the fun factor for the pros section. And yeah, I'll just start off with what I just mentioned. The game feels big. It feels absolutely huge. There's so much going on, so many enemies, so many different loot. It feels like you're playing an ARPG, man. Different events that you run into, shops, different levels that you go on. Just so many different things that you can run into, and it feels expansive, feels immersive, feels really big. It also feels extremely tense. Combat is tense. The push your luck mechanic is tense, and especially that fear mechanic is extremely tense. When you're roaming around and that lantern's about to burn out, or worse yet, if it does burn out, the game gets really tense, man. And when you find that oil, ooh, is it a relief? Boy, is it a relief when you find that oil. It is absolutely incredible. So tons of tension in the game. It definitely adds a lot to it there. And it's very balanced in terms of luck versus strategy. Of course, you're going to get the one-off, 1 in a million chance that you run into a demon on, the first room of the first level and die to him. But most of the time, from my experience and the experience of others from the feedback I've got, the games are typically very close. You either just barely win or you just barely lose. And when you do barely lose, you're like, I want to play. I got to try again. And I love that, dude. It gives you that feeling of like, I was so close. I'm going to play again and I'm going to get it this time. So very, very balanced in terms of luck versus strategy. Of course, having the ability to spend stamina to mitigate your dice rolls, having the ability to use your lucky coins to mitigate your to hit rolls. And all your different, gear and abilities and skills, and all of that factors into the decision making to mitigate that luck, and really balances the luck to skill ratio there. Also, leveling is extremely rewarding and adds to the fun factor. You gain experience points when you kill enemies, and as you gain experience, at certain number thresholds, you will unlock the skills for your particular class. So that makes you feel like you're progressing. It makes you feel like you're actually leveling up and like your character is getting stronger when you unlock those skills. So that's a great addition to the game, and it's maybe not quite as in-depth as the Iron Helm skill system, but you have to keep in mind, Iron Helm is a more medium-sized box game that has a lot more space from more cards and everything, whereas Crypt Crawler is just in this little mint tin, and I think way more so than, I hate to make comparisons, but you know, I kind of have to make my point, way more so than say in like Tin Helm or Tin Realm, where your character just has the one skill. In Crypt Crawler, depending on what class you are, you get 3 different skills that you unlock progressively as you gain experience points, and that makes it feel, to me, more like Diablo 2 or like an ARPG, Grim Dawn, Path of Exile, insert ARPG here. Like you're leveling up your character, getting experience points, and earning new skills that make your character stronger. And then the games, aside from being very close most of the time, whether you win or lose, they're also extremely dynamic, and every run feels very unique and very different. And I've also got that feedback from other people. There's just so many moving parts in Crypt Crawler, so many different weapons that you can get, different enemies you can run into, how their modifiers affect how they play, the different map cards, all the different events, the different potions, the shops, everything, man. There's so many different things in the game that make every run feel unique and feel very, just very special and unique. And no 2 runs are going to feel alike. So that's all the praise that I have for Crypt Crawler. Now I'm going to move into the cons list for Crypt Crawler, because even though I made the game, of course, I'm going to be fair, I'm going to be objective, and we're going to go over some of the things that I think are maybe some shortcomings or cons for the game. So starting with the components and quality, there are a lot of components, and I did have a couple people message me and say, how in the world did you get everything to fit inside of the tin? I have tried and I can't get it to fit. Unfortunately, guys, that is a bit of a thing. You're gonna have to play Tetris with it. If you want everything to fit, once you figure it out, you'll be fine. You'll get it in there. Like I tend to, whenever I didn't sleeve the game, I'd put all the tracking cubes right next to each other in like a little grid, and then I'd put all the little soul crystals, and then I'd put all the little mini dice on top of the cards, and it gives you just enough room that you can boop, and you can clamp the tin closed, and you're good to go. But some people were having a little bit of an issue with that. I don't know if it's maybe a variability in a variance in the tin size or something. I kind of doubt that it's that, but you just got to finagle it a little bit. So that can maybe be a little bit of a con, that there's so many components. But again, I didn't want to cut any content from the game. I just didn't want to cut any content from the game, man. Like it's jam-packed full of content, and it can fit in the tin. You just gotta deal with it a little bit, or that's why I provided the little pouch. You can just toss all the components in the pouch, keep that with the tin, and you're good to go. Also, it doesn't, like some of these other games, it won't fit in the tin if it's sleeved with all the components. So if you sleeve the game, you're going to have to use that little pouch to put the components in if you want to sleeve the game. Otherwise, it should be good. You just play some Tetris with it to get everything to fit. And then as far as the game mechanics goes, enemy abilities would have been a nice addition to add a little bit more variety to the enemies. And I did touch on this because the enemies deal certain types of damage, right? They might inflict fear, or they might inflict poison or burn, or just regular physical damage. And then of course, the enemies feel different because the resolution cards act also as modifier cards that modify the enemy's stats. So the enemies definitely feel very dynamic. I think more so than in any of the other games that are on the list, in my personal opinion. Especially because of those modifier cards. But it would have been cool if I had a little bit more space on the enemy cards to add some other abilities. I'm not going to try to think of any necessarily off the top of my head, but something a little bit more unique other than just the type of damage that they inflict to you would have been cool to add to the cards. But you know what? It is what it is. You only have so much room on a card, especially a mint tin card. It's a smaller size card. So that's maybe just one little shortcoming of the game that I could mention, that even during the creation of the game, I was like, man, I wish I had just a little bit more space so I could fit some unique abilities for the enemies. But that's also something that I could introduce in a future expansion, much like Jason Glover did in Desolate with the danger cards. You can, flip those danger cards when you fight an alien, and it gives it like an attribute. I could always try to do something, a similar idea, maybe in a future expansion. Maybe the enemies can get some sort of like trait, you know what I mean? Or maybe they have some kind of trait or something like that, or buff or something that, adds some kind of ability to them. I think that would actually be kind of cool. So that's pretty much the only shortcomings that I could find for the game, if I'm being honest with you. And it's because I made the game and I spent months working on it and fine-tuning it to my personal liking. So again, guys, once again, all of the games on this list, in the order that they're in. This is my own subjective opinion. You know, I'm sure there's games on this list that you might like more than Crypt Crawler. I'm sure many of you guys will be like, no, I like Iron Helm more than Crypt Crawler, or I like Rogue Dungeon the best, or I like, you know, Dust Runner the best. And that's totally cool. That's your opinion. If you want to make your own top 10 list, hey, more power to you, go for it. This is just my list. And yeah, man, Crypt Crawler, I just have to be completely honest. It's not just because I made the game and I'm being vain. Part of it is because I made the game. It's because it's everything that I like and all the inspiration that I took from these other amazing games and added my own unique flair and ideas and mechanics and everything to the game to turn it into what is for me the perfect dungeon crawling solo player Minton experience. And I absolutely love it, dude. It's like as cheesy as it might sound, I feel like Crypt Crawler is like the crowning achievement of my life. Like if I never accomplish anything else, I'm just like, I'm satisfied, man. I made Crypt Crawler and people are playing the game and enjoying it and sharing their experiences with me. And so it's been nothing but a pleasure, guys. So this video is unbelievably long. If you are still here, you are an absolute champion, dude. Thank you guys so much for all the support this year. It has been an amazing year. We made it to 1,000 subscribers, guys. We crushed it, man. We surpassed 1,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and that was my goal. And man, I just want to thank all of you guys so much for being here along for the journey, whether you joined way back, you know, when it first started at the beginning of the year, late last year, or whether you just showed up, you know, in the past couple days. It doesn't even matter, guys. I'm just so grateful that all of you guys are here. And it has been amazing, guys. It has been such a cool experience and a cool journey. And it's not over, guys. This is just the beginning, man. We're going to press forward into 2025 and hope things go well this year and hope that we're able to continue to share these experiences and these fun times and fun games together. And I'm going to be here to do that for you guys and provide you a little bit of levity and joy in your lives, hopefully, and let you escape from the hectic real life world sometimes, guys, and you can come hang out with me and we can play some of these awesome games together. So there it is, dudes. That was my top 10 favorite solo player games of 2024 right there, dudes. I hope you enjoyed this, guys. This was a blast to make, man. It was cool sitting down and reminiscing and going through all of these games and coming up with the different pros and cons for them. I put a lot of thought into it, so I hope you guys appreciate that. Like I've mentioned a couple times, I know the video is extremely long. You probably freaked out when you saw the timestamp on the video, but I know several of you recently have told me that you enjoy the more long-form content. And this is it. This is probably about as long as it's ever going to get right here, guys. So I did a very deep dive into all of my my thoughts and opinions on all of these games, and I hope that gives you a very objective take and maybe helps you form, you know, your own opinions and come to your own conclusion and make your own decision about whether you want to purchase any of these games and give them a go right there. So I wanted to give them all their own fair shake and be objective about it. So there it is, guys. Hey, if you like this video, man, hit that thumbs up like button, click the red subscribe button, and click the bell so you can stay notified every time I upload a new video. And there's going to be plenty more to come, guys. All the games you've seen on this list, there's more playthroughs coming, dude. So stick around for that. And hey, guys, thank you so much. Here's to 2025, dudes. And until next time, have a good one, and I'll see you in the next video.